Cool. Just wanted to confirm. Okay, I think we're ready.
You're set.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town Board work session for Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. We have a brief agenda in work session, and then immediately thereafter, at approximately 7 p.m., we will be moving into our fifth public hearing on the draft generic environmental impact statement and the form-based code. But the first thing we're going to do during our work session is to discuss among the town board members the results of the Chappaqua Central School District Board of Education report that we received and was the focus of a joint meeting between the town board and the BOE last Wednesday. So first, we're going to introduce our Director of Planning, Sabrina Charney Hull, who will provide a brief overview.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Before we start, one of the questions that I had in my mind, and the consultant team had provided a slide deck as part of their presentation of 60 slides, which summarized their findings based on the directive they were given by the school district. There is, in regards to professional reports, there's a whole background or appendices to that slide deck, which I believe will help clarify some of the information presented. I think there was a message that was also sent out by the school district talking about additional information that the consultant team may have. So I don't want to mislead anybody thinking that that was the report. I think that there's more information that needs to be appended to that, specifically, which will help answer a lot of questions that I had regarding some of the assumptions that have directed the conclusions in that presentation. So tonight, I'm just going to quickly kind of go through what the consultant team went through in regards to the report. I'm going to kind of cut out a bit and just kind of get to the nitty gritty. I'm going to start and talk about our DGEIS. Our DGEIS used the Rutgers multipliers to help calculate the number of school children. We had asked the school district for additional information. We used whatever they gave us, but at the end of the day, it was the school district's numbers, which, if you recall, the maximum build out generated 114 school children. We also had asked the school at that time for capacity information. They did not furnish us with capacity information. The consultant team that they recently hired did present information on capacity analysis. So that will help, all of this information will help enrich our DGEIS to help us get a fuller picture of the impacts when it comes to school children. From what they shared with us, they came up with a number of school children maximum number of school children under 3 different scenarios based on birth rate. And they had 3 different options of configured birth rate. And so they had scenario 1, which assumed 110 children were born in that time period, a year. Scenario 2 was 135 children born during a time frame. And then the last scenario, the third scenario, is 160 children born during that time frame. That is the basis that they use to look at the number of school children in relation to the number of housing units that exist today and those that exist as planned under the form-based code. For me, as a practitioner, I would want to understand a little more in detail how they came up with the birth rate. It was decades, it was a couple decades. What makes them lean towards one scenario being closer to what is going on now versus another? And what is that expectation? So understanding the birth rate with the number of housing units, ultimately, they delivered an analysis that looked at school children generation over 3 scenarios. The scenario 1 of 110 births, scenario 2 of 135 births, and scenario 3 of 160 births. What does this mean? It means that there would be, under their most dense scenario, scenario 3, 4,855 kids within the school district. Okay, scenario 2 is 4,231 school kids. Scenario 2 was 4,231 school kids, and scenario 1, the maximum capacity could house 3,597 school kids. So the school district, the consultant team used this birth rate and the capacity with the number of housing units. And then they dissected into the capacity of the individual schools, the elementary schools, the middle school, and the high school, to determine what is the maximum capacity of those buildings. That is something that's new that we did not have for the DGEIS, which is very helpful. So they went through and they identified at what point, during what scenario, we would run into capacity issues at each of the schools. So, under scenario 1, the standard, the 110 birth rate, there wasn't any impact or exceedance of capacity in the schools, according to the consultant's report. It was
Sabrina,
only,
let me just jump in. Sabrina,
sure.
Sabrina, just make it clear. When you say capacity, you're not talking 100% capacity. It was 85% capacity.
Correct. Again, needing to understand the inputs into that 85% would be essential into understanding is this realistic? How conservative are they being? I don't know. I don't have answers to that. On their slide presentation, it was 85% was their calculation. When we started to exceed capacity, it was in scenario 2. The maximum capacity of 4,231 kids, where we would run into capacity issues at Grafflin and Bell over different time periods. Okay, so they were saying that between 6 and 9 years, they would see exceeding capacity at Grafflin. Then in the next 12 to 14 years, there may be capacity issues at Bell Middle School. There was never an exceedance under scenario 2 at the high school. So again, it looked at all of these different configurations with 3 baselines of the birth rate to really try and get a handle on what the existing capacity is. And this is existing capacity. When you start factoring in the build out analysis, and again, going through their slide deck, there's some inconsistencies. There was a slide that provided you multipliers of number of school children based on bedroom count for certain developments that are underway or already built in the town, 91 Bedford, Conifer, and then the proposed 91 townhomes. Some of that information is not what was given to them by me. Okay, I am their resource. So for example, there was a mix up in the bedroom count at Conifer. And so that needs to be proofed without having the background data. How many other inputs did they put into that number to get that multiplier, and really understanding how it was used? It's difficult, but there's corrections on that slide. There's also slide number 38 of their presentation, which talked about assumptions to changes in housing mix, where they were talking about 1 bedrooms becoming 1 bedrooms with a den that's going to be used by a 2-bedroom. What is that based off of? They make an assumption, but I don't have the backup as to why they're making that assumption. So, this information, all of this information was provided to our consultant team to fact check it, as well as understand what it means to determine if it is actually valid. Again, I put in a question to John Chow at the school district asking if there would be more information, or if I could get a hold of the background information to fully understand the analysis, because as you know, the inputs that go into an analysis are critical to understanding the outputs. But at the end of the day, in their population projections in the beginning of their presentation, there was a difference of anticipated school children from our study area. Kimley Horn estimated 114 children. The consultant team working for the school district estimated 150 children. Okay, so we were not that off in regards to the number of school children coming from the study area based on the change in zoning. It is also important to point out that out of that 150 school children within the study area, 50 of those school children were estimated to come from development on town land. They had the time frame of our analysis wrong. They used a different time frame than we did, but in the end of the day, it looks as if we were comparing 114 kids to 150 kids. So, and I think I'm going to leave that with you. I could go into more detail on any different aspect of that presentation if you want me to. What I would say is I really need additional more information to really make sense of it. And our consultant team is making sense of it as well. So I'm going to leave you with that, and any questions or discussion you want to have, I'm happy to help you out with that.
Thanks, Sabrina.
Sure.
I think we probably each have things we want to say in sort of reflecting on the presentation that we viewed last week on Wednesday. Maybe I'll start and then ask everybody to sort of chime in, and then we can have a sort of broader discussion about it. I thought I would start by just sort of rewinding a little bit and setting the stage for this conversation. So back on November 23rd, 2020, the Chappaqua Central School District Board of Education sent a community-wide email and letter to warn Newcastle residents in CCSD that they were, quote, deeply concerned that the Newcastle Town Board's rezoning plan as it stands in its current form could negatively impact our school system. Specifically, the Board of Education warned of, quote, increased enrollment that may well exceed the DGEIS projected increase in all of our schools due to the build out of numerous residential units in the Chappaqua hamlet, as well as, quote, potential degradation in the quality of education resulting from a significant increase in enrollment without a proportional increase in tax revenue. In addition, in this letter, the BOE urged community members to get involved, stating, quote, we encourage the community to participate in this important development that could profoundly impact the character of our town and the quality of education in our schools. The BOE called on residents to, quote, make their voices heard. And they certainly did. After this letter was sent, the town board received dozens, if not more, letters from community members. Most of the letters we received went something like this. Dear Town Board, the CCSD sent an email to all of the parents in Chappaqua opposing the form-based code. I'm writing this letter to express my deep concern for the proposed rezoning plan. I strongly oppose the form-based code. I chose Chappaqua to raise my kids because of Chappaqua excellent school system. The proposed form-based code has a very inaccurate and misleading estimate of the potential increase of student enrollment due to the form-based code. An excellent school district is the thing we cherish most about our town, and now we are facing a huge risk to lose it due to the form-based code. Some residents went even further. One resident said, quote, it is unfortunate that town leadership has demonstrated greater concern for incentivizing construction of larger buildings in Chappaqua than for ensuring that the school district continues to have the resources to provide excellent educational opportunities for all students in its care. These letters, and this is two examples of many that we received, these letters have really been distressing for all of us on the town board to receive, even painful. All 5 members of the town board have kids in the Chappaqua Central School District, and none of us would support a code that would adversely impact our own children's education. Throughout this process, we've said over and over how we're listening to feedback from the community and from interested agencies. We're grateful for the engagement from the CCSD and the Board of Education, which makes our code and in fact our entire community stronger. In their letter from November 23rd, the Board of Education informed the community that they, quote, questioned the accuracy of the projected number of school-age children that would potentially result from the maximum build-out scenario under the form-based code. And the Board of Education, as we now know, and Sabrina described for us, engaged their own consultants to perform an independent analysis to determine the, quote, realistic impacts of the form-based code. The town board offered to have our own consultants work with CCSD and the Board of Education to reanalyze the estimates at no cost to CCSD under the terms of our existing contract. They declined, and we accepted their decision to perform an independent analysis. We offered to make our experts and town hall staff available to answer any questions or provide any input to their consultants, and we extended our public hearing on the DGEIS. On Wednesday, January 13th, we were pleased to attend the joint meeting with the BOE to review the results of their consultants' analysis. Overall, my most significant takeaway was that the CCSD's projected number of school-age children under the maximum build-out scenario really wasn't all that different from the towns, as you heard from Sabrina. We estimated 114 school-age children. They projected 150, a difference of only 36 kids. When you consider that school enrollment has dropped from a peak of 4,245 students in 2007 to 2008 to 3,556 students this year, it seems unlikely that an increase of 114 or 150 students will degrade the quality of education in our esteemed school district. In addition, I have a few specific observations on what we were presented on Wednesday night. The first thing that the consultants did relative to the form-based code was to create a custom multiplier for the Chappaqua Central School District. As I referred to earlier, applying this customized multiplier to the maximum build-out scenario, the consultants came up with their projection of 150 school-age children resulting from that scenario. I was somewhat surprised in creating a customized multiplier that the consultants did not look at case data from recent developments, data which was provided by the town to the consultants. For example, we have actual data from the cupola building at Chappaqua Crossing, as well as the enclave townhomes that were recently built up in Pleasantville, both of which could be used to sort of test the accuracy of the customized multiplier. I'll be honest, I actually haven't done the math on this. Maybe Sabrina has, I don't know. So I don't actually know if it's higher or lower, but I think this is something that would be worth looking at, is some of the actual data that we have. The second thing that the consultants did once they came up with that custom multiplier and that projected number of potential school-age children in the district was to project what our future district-wide enrollment would look like. First, they looked at those projections without any new housing units, so absent the form-based code. To come up with these projections, the district used, as you heard from Sabrina, the average number of live births, and they came up with 3 different scenarios. Now, my concern about these projections is they do not account for the clear trend line, which shows a decrease in enrollment. So using an average number of live births to project enrollment really would only make sense if that average was a way to come up with a number because of fluctuations between both high and low. However, in this case, where there's a clear trend line showing a decrease over time, the average seems like the wrong tool to use. I came up with an alternative in which I calculated the percentage change in live births from 2010 to 2017. Then I applied that percentage change to enrollment to calculate what would happen if births continued to decrease, as they have over the past 15 years. In this alternate scenario, enrollment would fall from 3,556 today to 3,031 in 7 years. Considering that the population has fallen, as I mentioned before, from a peak of 4,245 in 2007 to 2008 to 3,556 today, I think this is a reasonable projection. It's my strong recommendation to the consultants to consider adding at least one scenario in which enrollment continues to decline, as it has historically. I don't know whether it's going to decline or it's going to increase, but it seems to me that before accepting the final report from the consultants, CCSD should be requesting this additional information. The next thing that the consultants did was to add the potential increase in the number of school-age children under the form-based code to the enrollment projections, basically adding that 150 kids that they've estimated relative to the maximum build-out scenario to the different enrollment scenarios, those 3 scenarios that they came up with. Here, my concern is that the consultants assumed, as you heard from Sabrina, a completion date of 2030 for all potential units under the maximum build-out scenario for the form-based code. This is completely unrealistic. Our DGIS uses 15 years as the baseline for how long it would take to achieve the maximum build-out due to a number of different variables and a chain of events really that would need to occur in order to reach that maximum build-out, including but not limited to the sale of town-owned property. The idea that all of this building, all of this development would happen in 7 years isn't realistic. The consultants then looked at the financial impact of the potential 150 additional students on the CCSD budget. Here, there isn't much for us to say, except then to reiterate the point that the potential increase would be more gradual than is currently shown in the report. The total increase to the budget from the 150 students at an average cost per student of $35,721 is projected to be $5.4 million. But again, this would be realized over 15 years. In reviewing the budget numbers, I wanted to make two observations. The first is that the budget model for 2021 to 22 shows an increase of $7.6 million in property tax levy for this coming year. I was surprised to see that the district proposes to increase property taxes in the coming year by 6.8%. And I wondered why the school district isn't considering allocating fund balance to offset these increases. This, of course, is outside of the bounds of the form-based code and its impact on the budget, except perhaps it's worth noting that the entire projected increase in expenditures in the district related to the form-based code, that $5.4 million quote that I gave you earlier, is actually less than what the district intends to increase the budget by, those projections for the coming year. Also, please keep in mind, of course, that the form-based code and those additional families will generate additional revenues to the district. My second point on the financial analysis is that the modeling for expenditures is based on a projected number of students and the average cost to educate a student in CCSD with a 2% inflation rate. However, we don't have the benefit of seeing historical data, and I would request that that be considered as well. Since the peak enrollment in 2007 to 2008, the enrollment in the district has dropped, again, from 4,245 to 3,556. During that same period, the budget has grown from 102 million in 2007 to 2008 to 128 million in 2020 to 2021. That's a 25% increase. Since we are shown charts that depict the increase in the budget due to a projected rise in enrollment with and without the new form-based code units, it would also be useful to see the historical data as to what the budget has looked like in recent history when enrollment was in fact falling. So I'm actually going to turn this over to Deputy Supervisor Jeremy Sland, because I know he's been looking at the capacity study really closely, which is the third major area that's discussed in the consultant's report. And then we can kind of circle back and have an open conversation as well. So Jeremy?
Thank you, thank you. I'll be not as thorough as you, but you touched on many, many points. One of the things that we all realized was that this issue in terms of capacity, that 85% capacity, is not born from even the maximum scenario on the form-based code. Realistic issues aside, in terms of selling property, all public property, nonetheless, even if it happened in a split second, it's still not a form-based code issue. It's a much wider district issue. And when I looked at page 57 and 58, the enrollment capacity spreadsheets, and I certainly could have been reading them wrong. We had only received these about 2 hours before we met with them. But it appears that, for example, that the enrollment, this is for Grafflin, enrollment starts to potentially exceed capacity in 6 to 9 years with the new housing, and only about 2 years later without the housing, in terms of the development of the form-based code, assuming the maximum. And again, that's a big assumption. Similarly, on page 58, when we looked at the Bell Middle School, They indicate that Bell will exceed capacity at 85% capacity in 12 to 14 years. And if you look at the chart, if I'm reading it again correctly, you're looking about, as opposed to 12 to 14 years, you're only looking about a year or so before that where it starts to almost equal to start to exceed capacity. So it's almost, I use the term a wash, not in a way that I'm minimizing what that means, but it's a wash in terms of if there's an issue with capacity, this is something the school district, outside of what we're doing here, I assume has been aware of for some time and is addressing long term, because if true, if they believe what their consultants are saying under that 135 births a year scenario, then no matter whether or not the form-based code happens, the school district needs to address this issue. But on the flip side of that, if in fact the form-based code did happen to the maximum, and again, we're going to be reviewing this, and I'm sure changing the footprint, looking at building sizes, but using that as the threshold, that impact is nominal and can be built in to whatever the school district is doing. I watched the second work session with the public, and although the school district did not engage us, they engaged the public and their consultants back and forth during that second proceeding. And Ms. Tipp had mentioned that, to my recollection, that the school district could not redistrict, and they would have to potentially build out. And what surprised me, and I'm not certainly in the Board of Education, but what surprised me was in December of 2019, when Ivy and I, and Lisa was there as well, but we were discussing the Chapel Crossing with adding the basements at Chapel Crossing, the 91 units, granted different scales here, but that Ms. Tipp had said when she came to that meeting that we could redistrict, and we've done that in the past. So I don't know if something has happened legally or there's some reason why they wouldn't be able to redistrict should the issue arise. But again, that's not born from the form-based code, that's born from something else. And a couple more things to finish up on this point. When we look at tax dollars, and I'm sorry if you mentioned this, Ivy, before, assuming again that the public land is all sold and 425 people do not oppose it on a referendum that's permissive, because based on the last gubernatorial, if we were going to use it now, it was roughly 8,500 voters. 5% of that is roughly 420. Well, the number is 425. So assuming 425 people did not oppose it, and this went through, the school, whatever sitting town board was there could make all of that property fee simple, meaning this tax assessment in terms of what's going to be generated is way off. And if nothing else, more monies by far could be generated from this development, as opposed to just looking at all rental units. So those are just some of the things that I wanted to touch on, but Ivy, you certainly hit most of it in depth.
Thanks, Jeremy. Lisa, do you want to jump in?
So I don't need to go in anymore to numbers and what Ivy and Jeremy just talked about. We know there's a bit more to discuss. I kind of want to just say that it really disheartens me that this has become so confrontational. And I think any issue, obviously people are going to be on any side, but to me, and one of the reasons I joined the town board almost 8 years ago was because I wanted to collaboratively help and make the town a better place. And that's why I've said for many, many weeks now, I welcome any comments because that helps to make a form-based code better. It's the same with the school board. It shouldn't be that they're against the form-based code necessarily or for it. But, I'd rather hear, instead of that blanket statement, I'd rather hear real reasons. And let's work collaboratively, not in a confrontational manner, with everyone. And let's figure it out. I know that the school board wants the best for the town. And I know that we on the town board want the best for the town. And I know our residents do too. And it doesn't mean that reasonable minds can't differ. Of course they can. And of course they should. And I definitely think that when you have conflict and you have people with different views, that's what ultimately comes together to find the best solution. And to me, that's what we're doing here. And I really am disheartened when I hear from any side, you know, really kind of bashing of individuals and ideas, when really we should be coming together. And, you know, I know it sounds a little Pollyanna, but I really do believe that, you know, coming together, we can have these discussions and come out with what's best for the town in a way that really impacts everyone positively, and maybe doesn't include things that don't. So, you know, I just wanted to say that again, because I know we're going to hear comments today. I know members of the town board welcome all those comments, as we do from the Board of Ed and anyone else, pro or con. But I really want to make sure that we're working collaboratively to get this done together for really the best, you know, output and the best impact on our town. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for saying that. I feel like that was really important and really well stated. I'm going to turn to Councilwoman Lauren Levin, if you want to jump in.
Hi, everyone. You know, I mentioned this at the inauguration last week, and essentially, to Lisa's point, having honest and open discourse is critical in making the town a better place. And I too, with Lisa, as well as the other town board members, I think by nature, human beings just don't really like being confrontational and don't like conflict. And having open and honest conversations is much more productive. And listen, like, trust me, I know a lot of people who are opposed to the form-based code. I'm friends with them, and people who I'm friends with and who I've known for years, our kids have gone to nursery school together, refuse to talk to me about it. And I find that odd, because again, like the goal of this and the goal of the town board is to listen to folks and to hear them out. And that's what we're doing here. And that's the time we've committed to all of you to make sure that we do something that's right for the community. And certainly, you know, there's definitely going to be points where we all cannot agree. At the same time, I think that if we speak to each other in a respectful manner and in a collaborative way, we can come and find the right balance there. And I certainly hope that folks have heard us throughout our work sessions. All of us are not, you know, this draft needs a lot of work. we certainly have our work cut out for us. So, you know, we're not here pushing this through or ramming it down, you know, the proverbial tunnel or whatever to get it approved. Like, it certainly needs adjustments, and that's what we're here to do, is to make the right adjustments. So I really do hope that the school board will meet with us in the next couple of weeks and work with us. And, you know, I'm actually friendly with a couple of school board members as well. They have my cell phone numbers. Like, the point is that we're here to talk to each other and to figure this out. So thank you so much for taking the time to be on this call. I know it's definitely a lot. So we really appreciate all of you.
Thanks, Lauren. And last but certainly not least, our newest town board member, Laurie Morton.
Hi, good evening, everybody. So I was really eagerly awaiting the CCSD consultant reporting, because I think, like many residents in town, I had some difficulty envisioning the full hypothetical build out, nearly 1,000 units, yielding 130 students. That, you know, that for me, that seemed like a little bit of a logic gap that didn't exactly make sense. I was really looking forward to, you know, this next round of analysis to say, okay, well, maybe this is some eccentricity of the Rutgers model that, you know, that yielded that kind of a value. And, you know, and instead, how others have already described, the CCSD's consultant analysis used a model that I think is really quite pertinent to our district, right? Where they essentially took recent data from surrounding areas proximal to Chappaqua, school districts that are also among the best school districts in the country. I know we like to think that CCSD is the best in the country, but there are other school districts in the region that are also quite extraordinary. and used actual housing data for different varieties and sizes of housing to inform the model. So I would absolutely like to see more of the details, as Sabrina was referencing, to really kind of get a feeling for how the sausage is made there. But it was a bit of a relief, I think, to see that even under the fullest hypothetical build out, including properties owned by the town, including, you know, fields that presumably will remain recreational spaces, that the numbers are really not that far off, that the model was, you know, really negligible. There was a relatively negligible difference in the multipliers for different categories of housing and the expected number of children per unit. So I thought that was quite a relief. I must admit, I'm a little bit confused about this morning's or today's communication from the school district, because they seem to have doubled down on their concerns on the potential impacts of large-scale development on the school district, without specifying what concerns are not addressed by their consultant's analysis that provided results similar to the assumptions that came out of the DGEIS. And, you know, particularly as the substance of the letter they reference from November 23rd was, you know, sent to the entire school district, focused on questioning the accuracy of the DGEIS projections. So if the November 23rd letter was really built around questioning the accuracy of those projections, and then those projections are replicated quite closely by their own analysis, not really understanding the substance of the continued concern expressed in today's letter. So I really hope that the district can provide some clarity on what the remaining concerns are. You know, there were some that were articulated in school board letter to the town around construction impacts on the middle school, traffic impacts on the middle school, particularly downtown, that are not addressed by the consultant's projections for school capacities. So perhaps that's the substance that remains. If that's the case, then again, I hope that the district can provide some clarity on what the remaining concerns are, because then we can address them in the code and in the planning for the future.
Thanks, Laurie. Does anybody have any sort of further reflections or thoughts on anyone else's comments? Okay. All right. Well, knowing that we have the public hearing coming up at 7 o'clock, the only thing I wanted to say in closing for our work session conversation is just to say, you know, I actually, I was glad to hear that the Board of Ed is going to be continuing to review these results with their consultants. I really do think it's critical, absent the form-based code, set that aside. I really feel like it's critical for the district to have, you know, their accurate enrollment projections and their kind of sound budget projections and the capacity analysis for the schools. So it seems like this is a good work product for them to have, separate and apart from the form-based code, and certainly based on, you know, the conversation we've had here tonight. You know, we've raised a couple of questions. So, you know, I look forward to, you know, having further discussion on that. The town board welcomes the opportunity to meet with the Board of Education again. And we, as Laurie just said, are all, you know, eager to hear the board's insights and to discuss them with them in a meeting. So, you know, we actually earlier this evening sent an email to the Board of Education inviting them to come meet with us in a joint session 2 weeks from tonight on Tuesday, February 2nd, which is Groundhog's Day. And we do intend to close the public hearing tonight, or that is our going in plan is that we are proposing to close the public hearing tonight. But we look forward to receiving to this conversation with the Board of Ed and to receiving their final comments to us prior to the close of the public comment period, which is going to be 30 days after the public hearing closes. So that's all that I have. So Jill, can we get through the other 2 items on our agenda in 5 minutes? 10 minutes?
I'm thinking we could speed talk our way through it. Okay, the next item is a request for an advocacy letter for COVID-19 priority vaccinations for our essential workers, our DPW, and our water unit guys that are currently in 1C. So they are not eligible for any vaccine, if in fact a vaccine were available to anyone at this point. So that's just either a thumbs up or thumbs down from the board to go forward. And the last thing is the consent agenda draft policy. Nick had raised this before. Nick, do you want to just go through it briefly for us, especially on days like today when we've got a jam-packed public hearing that's about to follow and a couple of very routine things on the agenda?
Absolutely. So thank you, Joe. So in the agenda packet is a copy of a proposed consent agenda policy, copies of past agendas that Jill and I have gone through and marked up with indicating what we think would be appropriate to be put on a consent agenda, as well as an article that just describes what is the consent agenda. Right. So in brief, the consent agenda is a way to better manage meetings, to put non-controversial matters in which you have previously discussed at a workshop in which there is unanimous support for. And those are items such as the minutes, appointments, return of bonds or acceptance of bonds, things of that nature. I'll go into more
street
detail.
Opening permits, things like that.
Right. So, right. Thank you. And so the intent is to streamline your meetings so that you're spending time on other things, not things that you've already discussed. And as you know, we have a number of items where you'll read the resolutions. So in this case, those items would be listed, would be deemed one resolution, and each one would then be deemed by the town clerk to have been voted on independently. Anyone can ask that an item be removed. There's no discussion. As soon as someone says, so the way it would work at the beginning of the meeting, supervisor would say we have a consent agenda tonight, the following items or the board has a consent agenda before. Does anyone wish to have an item removed? Someone raises a hand, says I'd like to have items 7, 14, and 13 or 99 as some nights removed. You can do so and it's without any discussion. It then gets voted on separately. And then when you get to the voting portion of the meeting, the consent agenda will be voted as one vote for all the items except for those removed. And then you would vote separately on the items that were removed along with any separately listed items. If I go through the policy briefly, it really just sets forth in more detail what I just described, and there are 2 paragraphs I want to point to. Item A gives you examples of items that would be on the consent agenda. Demolition of unsafe structures, unpaid town fees, the acceptance or release or waiver of bonds, issuance of parade permits, seasonal appointments, and items of that nature. We've put forth what I haven't seen in other policies, but I think it's good to have a list of things that would not go on a consent agenda. And again, as this is a town board resolution and policy, this can be modified at future meetings without, it's not a local law, so it doesn't require public hearings. It's your policy. You get to decide how you run your meetings. Adoption of local laws, sales or lease of real property, awarding of bids pursuant to the general municipal law, adoption of a town budget. Those are just some examples of things that we came up with that would not be placed on the consent agenda. And again, the agenda is established by the administrator and the supervisor, who will use their understanding of the issues when placing items on a consent agenda as well as a regular agenda. So that's an overview of the policy and the process.
Any questions?
I just had one comment, which is just with regard to the use of the consent agenda and the items that could be put on the agenda. I just would want to note that for the duration of the state of emergency, and while we have these sort of COVID sort of emergency budget procedures that we've put into place, where the town board is reviewing purchases over $3,000 and that we are essentially in a hiring freeze except for the backfill for essential positions in the town, that those sorts of issues, I think for now, are not things that I would want to include in the consent agenda.
Okay, so it's interesting that you raised that, because one of the things under the administrative items is a authorization to approve an annual renewal for NIC Systems Corporations. It's the SCADA, it's the computer system basically that runs the Millwood Water Treatment Plant. It's an $8,000 item that is a regular budget item that we normally would not have brought to the board's attention, but again, because we're in the state of emergency and we're watching our COVID numbers, we've raised it to the board and we brought it to your attention so that you're aware that there is a high ticket item that it's an annual renewal for a computer system that runs our software, but I wanted the board to be aware of it because we are watching, our pennies and making sure that we're cognizant of where those big ticket items are. So we've included them as an administrative item just so when these types of vouchers either come across my desk or Rob Deary's desk, we're actually pulling them out to bring it to the board's attention and getting approval for them so that you know where the money's being spent. Because okay. And there's actually one other item on the administrative item that I just wanted Sabrina to talk about if she's still with us. Oh. Maybe she's coming back. I'm sorry. I wait because I'm digressing and I don't mean to. I didn't want to prematurely cut off the conversation on the consent agenda. I realized I had strayed a little bit. We hadn't really finished that. Are there any other questions about it? Okay, great.
And the next step will just be places for a vote. That's it.
So that'll be for next meeting. We'll put on for the town board meeting.
I do have some comments on the escalation of essential infrastructure workers from 1C into 1B. My concern about this is that the 1B category, the 1A and 1B category that are currently eligible, the pool of individuals in those categories massively outpaces the supply of vaccine, such that there aren't vaccination slots available for people in those categories beyond March, April. Slots are all full through March and April. The governor has indicated that their staging for the addition of 1C is estimated for March, April. So I feel like this is a kind of a moot issue. One, there's no vaccine to give folks in this category. And there's no vaccine to give people in the categories that are currently eligible. If we were to add the folks who are in 1C, which a large component of which is infrastructure essential employees that are not in contact with the public, then that just further dilutes the vaccine availability for the folks who are either at risk of death or at high risk of transmission to the public. So there's a public health impact of further diluting the availability of vaccine in a setting where we're really in a bit of a drought for the vaccine in the first place. So, I think there is certainly frustration because you see individuals who become qualified for a vaccine who may not literally fit the bill, people who work in administration and healthcare but aren't seeing patients, have been included in medical personnel categories. There's certainly other examples like that where people who have been able to kind of go along for the ride because the categories just don't have the precision to make sure that only the most eligible person, the literally most eligible person is prioritized. So I can see how that absolutely generates some frustration. And I also want to echo that the vaccination priorities are not driven by the value of the individuals to us by any stretch of the imagination, that they're driven by the essential public health need at the moment. So, so for that reason, I just don't think it's responsible to advocate for a larger inclusion or escalation of 1C into 1B when I don't think that it's going to make any vaccine available to those individuals. And, what I would perhaps want to advocate for is that the governor sticks to his word and does extend availability to 1C in the spring timeframe as they had estimated so far.
So I appreciate all of those concerns from a public health perspective, and I think that you make a lot of really excellent points. And at the same time, I think from a practical standpoint and from a sort of town management perspective, we have the very real experience of trying to keep enough men and women on the job in our community, and specifically in DPW and related to the water unit, to be able to provide this critical resource to our community. And so while I do not by any means discount the sort of public health information that is sort of driving your concerns, I am also at the same time mindful of the real experience that we've lived through over the past few months with these essential workers, and mindful of the fact that we need to continue to provide this critical resource and service to our community. And so for those reasons, I will continue to support this. And I think we will go ahead and, we'll go ahead and have that on our agenda for this evening, and certainly everyone is welcome to vote their conscience and so on. I don't know if anybody else has anything they want to add. Okay. Anything else for the work session, Jill? You said something about Sabrina?
Sorry, Sabrina, you still with us? Yes, sorry, we digressed. Go ahead. The last item on the under the administrative items is an authorization to request proposals for the Indian Brook Croton Gorge intermunicipal watershed overlay zone. 3 times fast. Go ahead.
So the Indian Brook intermunicipal watershed plan is a plan that was written in around 2010, I think it was. The 5 municipalities that are part of that, Newcastle being one of them, have been looking at writing a grant to update that watershed plan. The lead municipality is the town of Cortland. The village of Ossining is also assisting. They have prepared an RFP to be let to undertake an analysis of the 5 municipalities. I can tell you that Newcastle, due to the nature of our land use on the western side of town in the area of the Sunshine Children's Home, we have very advanced wetland regulations compared to the other municipalities involved in this. The intention of the analysis is to come up with an intermunicipal overlay to further protect the Indian Brook watershed. So as a partner municipality, they have been, they asked us to okay the RFP. My office has read through it and we're okay with it. I will be surprised to see what the cost of the proposals that we receive comes in at. Given the work that is outlined in the analysis or in the RFP. But so we're looking to join them and update our regulations.
And will we have a role to play in terms of reviewing the responses to the RFP?
We will all receive, all the member municipalities, their representatives will see copies of the RFPs and we will provide feedback to the town of Cortland, yes.
Great. I'm really excited about this. I'm full support, as you know, full support for this idea. And I want to do everything that we can as a municipality to support this work. So Sabrina, let us know how the town board can get involved and help. And if whatever you need, I want to be all in on this.
Great. Great. So right now, this is just an FYI to let you know that the RFP is being let, and we'll be getting back proposals, and I will update you from time to time, given your interest, to make sure that you know what's going on.
Yeah. So actually, it is not legally required to receive authorization to issue an RFP. We do it as a matter of course because I like the board to be aware of the actions that the town is taking, and I always think it's awkward for to come forward to the board with responses to an RFP that we've issued when the board didn't know that we had even issued it. So in that spirit, we're going to be asking for authorization to rebid the refuse and recycling. Our 7-year contract with Santa Pro is up at the end of this year. We will be going out to rebid it. Traditionally, SAB has assisted us with the preparation of the RFP. We know for certain that they've already have been reviewing the existing RFP and trying to figure out new and creative ways that we can step forward with our new 7-year. But the board should just be aware that next week it will be on the agenda for us to take in request permission. And the last administrative item is just authorization to request a proposal again for graphic design services for the town. And we talked about the fact that that was going to be a local preference, and hopefully women and minority-owned business would be fabulous as well. But we'll be looking for someone local to help us out with some graphic design services for the town. And that's the end of our administrative items. Why don't we save our actual actions for after the public hearing? And I think we're just about on time. 7:05, pretty good.
Not bad.
All right.
Can we take, so we were on time, and now I'm going to ask if we can take a 2-minute brief bio break and get started in just 2 minutes. Thank you.
Works for me. Okay.
Thanks. We'll get started in 2 minutes. I'm scrolling through my page to make sure everybody's back before we get started. And I think we have everyone. So, okay, let's go ahead and get started. Can we get a motion to, do we need to move to come out of the work session first, or just to open up the public hearing?
Yep, I think just open the public hearing.
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So we actually just came out of a work session in which the town board had a rather lengthy conversation about the results of the Chappaqua Central School District Board of Education consultants analysis with regard to the projections for the increase in the number of school-age children. So I certainly we won't repeat all of those comments, and I'll try my best here to keep it brief at the beginning before we go into the public hearing. I did want to make an announcement about this particular public hearing. So tonight, the town board will consider closing the public hearing on the DGEIS and adjourning the public hearing on the form-based code to a date to be noticed in the future. So we will leave the record open for written comments on the DGEIS for 30 days after the close of the public hearing, which would be until 4 p.m. on Thursday, February 18th, 2021. And before I comment on the next steps, I wanted to briefly summarize the steps that have already occurred in this process, in our seeker process. So a year ago, on January 14th, 2020, the town board introduced the DGEIS scope, which is in essence the table of contents for what would be studied in the draft generic environmental impact statement. The town board held several public hearings, and we received comments from both the public as well as from interested agencies, including the planning board, including the school board, and so on. We have as a result of that, I should say, with regard to the comments that we received on the scope, we received comments from the planning board. We did not receive comments from the school board on the scoping document. As a result, we revised that draft scope, and that was adopted ultimately by the town board on April 20th, 2020. Thereafter, the consultants prepared the DGEIS. So from April 20th, when we finalized our scope, until September, our consultants were working on the DGEIS and all of the things that you see there. And the town board accepted the DGEIS as complete on September 23rd, 2020. And then we scheduled our first public hearing for October 20th. Since that time, the town has held joint meetings with interested agencies, and here is where we met with the Board of Education, as well as the Chappaqua Volunteer Ambulance Corps, as well as the Chappaqua Fire Department. We held 3 community engagement sessions, and this is our 5th public hearing. And we have obviously received hundreds of comments during our public comment process. As to the next steps this evening, the town's consultants will now review all of the comments that have been received and will prepare responses, which will be included in the document that will be known as the final generic environmental impact statement, or the FGEIS. The seeker regulations require that the final generic EIS include the draft generic EIS with any revisions, and that all comments that are received on the DGEIS and the town board's responses to all substantive comments raised during the review of the DGEIS. When ready, the town board will review the consultant's draft FGEIS and provide comments before accepting the FGEIS as complete. After the town board accepts the FGEIS as complete, there will be an opportunity for the public to comment on the FGEIS before the town board adopts its finding statement. After the town board adopts a finding statement, it will then consider the adoption of the form-based code. In the months ahead, the town board will also be reviewing and considering changes to the form-based code, both to the areas zoned, to the review process, and to the substance as well. And we will be holding additional public hearings before there is a vote on the form-based code. I want to just say, as I have before, to provide some reassurance to the community that the form-based code is still a draft. The town is fully committed to taking the time to get this right. And rest assured that we have heard the feedback from the community as well as from all of the interested agencies. And we are taking all of this very much to heart. The current draft will change. And we look forward to working collaboratively and cooperatively with all community members and interested agencies as we move forward with this process. So that's all I wanted to say at the top. I did, however, before we get started, sorry, I'm going to pull up my screen for just a moment. You think I'd be getting better at this. Okay, so I think everybody can see my screen. Once again, these are the guidelines for our public hearing. For those of you who have not been here before. So when we call on you, please start by stating your name, your address in town, and your organization, if any. Please try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. We will give you a warning when 3 minutes is up and ask you please to wrap up your comments. Please try not to repeat the comments that are made by others. The purpose of the public hearing process is to uncover as many different substantive comments as we can. And so to the extent that we can hear new and different comments, that's really our priority is to try to unearth those new and different comments. Please do not expect a response during the public hearing. All of the substantive questions and comments will be addressed, must be addressed in writing by our consultant team. We ask folks to please submit your comments in writing to the address here, which is chappaqua.forward@mynewcastle.org. Even if you're presenting tonight, even if you're speaking tonight, if you have those comments written out and you can forward them to that address, it's super helpful. It goes up on our public comment portal, and it's helpful to us just to be able to make sure we're tracking all of the comments and responding to everything. We ask folks to please observe rules of courtesy, decorum, dignity, good taste, so on. We haven't had any issues there. It's our 5th public hearing. I don't think we'll have any tonight. We also ask that folks address all members of the town board and avoid speaking to any one member directly or trying to present to the general public. You're here to tell the town board what comments, questions, concerns, accolades, anything you'd like to share with us. And anyone who fails to yield the floor, I may boot them. I've said that before. I haven't had to do that. And lastly, with regard to the chat feature on Zoom, the chat feature, I believe, is not disabled. So you can type into the chat, but please don't type any substantive questions into chat. We are not able to capture those and include them in our record for the public hearing. We leave the chat function available for technical issues. If you're having any problems getting on once you've raised your hand, or you can't figure out how to raise your hand or unmute yourself, all of that can go into the chat. But we ask that you don't put any of your substantive comments in there because we're simply not taking them out of the chat and putting them into the public record. Okay, that's everything that I have. And just before we get started, do any of the other town board members have anything that they want to say? Jeremy, I see you raising your hand.
8 of my 3 minutes, if not less. Thank you for touching on the DGEIS and how it's not the form-based code. There was some confusion that this was a closing of the form-based code and people had to have their opinions in and their comments in today. That's not the case. There's ample time, months for that. I also want to say there's a few things that I've seen that are repeated. 5-story buildings, six garages throughout town, the train station issues in terms of public property and the schools. And you'll see if you listen, and I expect more as we go, a lot of these concerns are going to be addressed and alleviated because I don't think anyone on this town board wants to see 6 above ground garages. I don't think anyone on the town board, as we just discussed before, or I know they don't want to see the school system jeopardized. So all these issues that are being raised and brought up, and for that matter, the 5-story buildings, one of the things that occurred from the outset, and it's been an issue that I've been seeing on social media, is who was a part of the working group and who was able to be involved in the working group. As a preliminary matter, everyone in the public certainly had a right to be there. Unfortunately, who saw it and who didn't, who got involved and who didn't, we can't change the past. But one of the critical things I think it's important for everyone to know is I don't think anyone who was there, meaning Lisa, Ivy, and myself, who were there at the time, when we saw 5 buildings, we said, yes, we've been clamoring for 5-story buildings. And that's what we've always wanted throughout the municipality. That's simply not the case. In fact, there's a video somewhere, that I react. I use the term viscerally to it. I said, this is kind of ugly. This is ugly. People are going to be unhappy. There's going to be traffic issues. And as I took the time to allow our consultants to review it, to understand the process, to realize that just because it's there does not mean it's going to happen. And I'll close on that point and say that it's much easier to examine a 5-story building and then make it a 4 or 3-story building than it is to say, I'm going to have a 3-story building and later increase it to a 4 or 5-story building. So it's always easier to pull back than to add on after the fact. So, we hear about there was who was involved in this. The bottom line is everybody who has submitted questions and comments of substance, you are the ones who are controlling the show, irrespective, regardless, doesn't matter what was said at time 1, because once the consultants review all the information that everyone has provided in the comments, and once we engage and once we go back and forth, whatever needs to be amended, and we're going to agree and disagree on some things, is going to happen. So let's not misconstrue what happened in the past, that dictates that anyone else is answering to the community. We are the voters of the form-based code one way or another, and we're listening to you. And I just ask that you give us that consideration and work with us. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeremy. Anybody else? Are we ready to roll? Okay. Hearing none. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We have with us tonight Pam Thornton from NCCMC, who's going to be helping to usher people into the conversation. Hi, Pam.
Hello.
If we can take the first person with their hand raised, which I believe is Tara Walsh.
Yep. Tara, please unmute yourself.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
We can. Hi, Tara. If you can state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Tara Walsh. I live at 394 Whippoorwill Road in Chappaqua.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so from my knowledge, there's not been much data shared on the environmental impacts relating to form-based code. In July of last year, my little sister's best friend, Linda, decided to take her own life at the tender age of 18 years old with the hope of drawing attention to climate change. Although she did her best to make the world a better place, including zero waste initiatives at Greeley, she thought her death was the only way to get people to wake up to the problem and truly make big systemic changes. I am speaking tonight not for myself, but for the environment that cannot defend itself, and in the spirit of Linda. I created a climate change report specific to Chappaqua from over 50 scholarly sources. The report's conclusions are backed by science and independent from my ethical viewpoints. Within the next decade, we can expect climate disturbances to have a devastating effect on the community. These climate hazards far exceed flooding. Instead of the town preparing for the much required infrastructural defense to protect residents, the town's board is firmly focused on the hazardous offense of structural expansion. I went through the 466-page town hazard mitigation plan from a database perspective. The following critical keywords were disturbingly sparse. Power supplies was mentioned once, Zoonotic diseases was mentioned 0 times, mortality was mentioned 0 times, air quality was mentioned 5 times, and economically disadvantaged was mentioned 5 times. The form-based code environmental benefits revolve around a utopian fantasy of a better world, which I fully support. However, residents using bikes and limiting activities to a town center are ideals not supported by statistics. Facts do support the following. High-density residential housing accelerates the proliferation of new contagions, such as COVID-19. Extreme weather puts a strain on limited town resources and critical infrastructure. High-density clusters are more vulnerable to extreme weather impacts, including electrical fires and loss of air quality. Building structures require advanced technologies to reduce carbon emissions and energy costs. Without a doubt, I can say the form-based code enables easy development, and it's terrible for the town. More importantly, it is bad for lives. Now is not the time to consider such a dangerous proposition, let alone push it towards becoming a law later this year. At the very least, a comprehensive full scope economic and environmental impact analysis must be done that is backed by facts and Chappaqua. Yeah, that's it. Sorry, I got a little shaky because it's a very sensitive issue.
Tara, nobody knows better than I do how difficult it is sometimes to speak on a Zoom, especially when you're dealing with grief and loss. And I commend you for coming and for presenting, and I'm thankful for the information that you provided us. Thank you very much. Pam, the next person who has their hand raised is Douglas Padrella.
Yes, please unmute yourself, Mr. Padrella.
Hi, yes, thank you very much. My name is Douglas Pardella. I live at 504 West 167th Street in New York City. I'm a member of Open New York. We're an all-volunteer organization that advocates for housing of all types in wealthy towns and neighborhoods in order to lower housing costs for everyone in the metro area. There's a housing crisis in New York. There are too many people who are trying to live in too few homes. Now, Open New York has endorsed the form-based code because it will create more homes for more neighbors. Now, I've made a public comment before, but I'm making a public comment now in response to some of the notes that have been made by the board during the internal work sessions. The first is the idea of lowering building heights from 5 stories to 4 in some places and 4 to 3 in others. While it may seem like a small concession to the opponents of the code, it is worth considering the consequences of such a move. This could remove dozens, if not hundreds, of potential homes for people who want to live and move to Chappaqua. These are human beings who want to live near nature, who want to be able to commute into the city without using cars, who want to live in smaller homes, who want to ride their bike and walk around town, and who want to send their children to Chappaqua Public Schools. The second thing I'm worried about that the board has been discussing is putting 2 onerous regulations into the code. Letting people live in the types of homes that they want to live in, whether they're studios, row houses, 3-bedroom apartments, or, as is still the case in the vast majority of Chappaqua, single-family homes, is vitally important. For example, in some historic districts around other parts of the country, there are regulations about the types of windows that homes may have. Now, residents want to install newer, more energy efficient windows in order to save money and save the planet, but they're barred from doing so because of these types of onerous regulations. For example, also in Minneapolis, they've just legalized triplexes citywide, as there are no triplexes being built, not because of a lack of demand, but because of an overly restrictive regulations. Now, I just worry that some of the regulations that you have or are considering to put into the code in terms of lot consolidation restrictions or setback requirements or parking minimums will end up preventing homes from being built and preventing new neighbors from moving in. That's what I have to say. Thank you very much.
That's very interesting. I hope that you'll submit those comments in writing as well so that we can take a look at those instances that you called out just now.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person with their hand raised, Pam, is Scott and Natalia Levine.
Great. Thank you for inviting me to join you. It's Scott Levine, 149 King. It's heartening that you're talking about having honest and open dialogue, but that begins with all of us. And as of now, 2 sitting town board members have publicly misrepresented my words. Please, can we aspire to the honest and open standard together? So when we were thrust into virtual schooling this past spring, each day I would hear the Douglas Grafflin morning announcements with the student announcers saying, the choice is yours. So what I'd like to do is talk about choices. One big choice that Supervisor Poole and Deputy Supervisor Saland made was to vote to invite developers and their hired consultants, and only them, no regular residents, onto the key committee charged with planning Chappaqua future. Jeremy alluded to this a few minutes ago. In the recorded meetings, we can watch your developer appointees acting in plainly self-interested ways, and we can be pretty sure that regular residents would have steered the decision-making in more community-oriented ways. We've heard Mr. Stalland say that he sat there silently. He didn't laugh when the committee joked about getting Rolls Royces after they get wealthier from redeveloping Chappaqua. I guess we may hear a similar explanation for why our town leaders did not speak up to defend the community when they were discussing starving our schools of the funds needed for educational excellence from them building luxury condos. We've also heard your committee say that nothing is happening today in Chappaqua, not enough building. The view that nothing is happening today is very unfortunate, how out of touch with reality. My kids and those of our neighbors are growing up in the hamlet. We have a human-scaled, kid-friendly hamlet where parents are comfortable letting their middle schoolers spend time after school unsupervised. Hundreds of students attend Bell each day, and their safety and well-being needs to be a top priority, not turning the hamlet into a decade-plus major construction zone, heavy machinery backing up over sidewalks and all of that. You made unfortunate choices to not seek community input up front, to develop a shared vision as was done in Malta, in Port Chester, in Southampton. You made the unfortunate choice to not survey the community about what future it would like. Your attorney says it can't be done, but somehow these other places figured out how to survey their communities up front when planning their form-based codes. But despite these past unfortunate choices, it's not too late for you to now make a good choice. To pause, to roll your sleeves up and collaborate with our community to co-create a vision for the hamlet through a genuine charrette process, and to have that be at the core of a form-based code that the community is enthusiastic about. So as the school kids at Grafflin say, the choice is yours, and my hope is that you'll choose wisely. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I'll just point out that Lisa Katz was also a member of the town board during the previous administration. It's actually our longest serving town board member. So just want to acknowledge you, Lisa. The next person with their hand raised, Pam, I believe is Dan Prznik. Oh, Dan, Dan, correct me on the pronunciation of your last name. Brzezinski.
You can unmute yourself.
Hi, my husband's last name is difficult. This is Lynn Lambert, 55 Ridgewood Terrace, Chappaqua. The scope and disruption that the zoning changes laid out in the DGEIS seem quite unwanted and way too disruptive to me, to our little town we love and bought into. In a downtown area that comprises only 4 blocks, North and South Greeley and Upper and Lower King Street, it is way too much to squeeze in without causing massive harm to all who live, shop, and drive here. At the top of King Street Hill, we have 3 shopping centers, a gas station, the firehouse, and a new 3-story residential retail mixed building at 91 Bedford Road. We even have a 3-story apartment building next to small converted homes, which house a bike shop and a massage studio on either side of it. We are done. The neighbors don't want any more commercial or retail development here to interfere with our lovely vintage residential neighborhood with Victorian and other century homes. Leave this area alone too. Everyone I know can imagine very limited additions at select places like the Rite Aid site, the Center Street Firehouse, or the church property next to the Greeley House. But no one I know wants a wholesale unleashing of development on downtown. And no one I know wants the building heights to rise to even 4 stories, up from the 1-story or 2-story max that is now a huge change. We would need to see mitigations proposed for parking problems. Are there any without multi-level parking garages, which are so out of character here? Traffic problems. It's not like we can widen our narrow streets. Plans made to provide for workforce, empty nest / fixed income, and disabled housing. A real plan in place to create attractions to draw people to retail in our downtown. Without this, we won't have a vibrant retail environment. But where would we put them? That is the planning and zoning we should be exploring now. We know from experience that there is no way to for even another year of construction downtown. that it wouldn't destroy most of the retailers we have left, let alone the 15 years this could draw out. It just makes no sense, especially because social justice wise, which all of whom I know are in favor of, at max build out, the form-based code would only yield 6 affordable units per year over those same 15 years. So what argues for this plan? Please stop and let the allowed 3-story development proceed with planning board and architectural board oversight. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person with their hand raised is Ben Herman.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Hi, Ben, we can.
Hi, thanks. Ben Herman, 10 North Place. Please bear with me as I'd like to share some new real estate data and information that I'd like you to consider as you think about the best path forward, including key decisions regarding the size of buildings permitted, the rezoning area, phasing, and potential approval triggers. I know you're all looking at the profitability of 3 stories, and I thank you for that. What I'd like to bring to your attention is that the actual market rents at 91 Bedford and 39 Washington are 38% and 32% higher than the rents shown by Res Group in the market scan that is part of the DGEIS. These rents were used in a key data table in the market scan that resulted in the market rent input for the consultant's 3-story profitability model being materially lower than should have been used. Adjusting from there $310 per square foot to over $4 per square foot, as seen at new construction properties, will increase the profitability of 3 stories significantly and further prove that 3 stories is feasible. Note that affordable rents are separate from market rents, and I am commenting specifically on the market rents utilized. The town board should also consider whether the consultant-derived unit breakdown by bedroom type, the driver for such key items as student counts and parking requirements, is appropriate in light of the most recent new construction property, 91 Bedford's unit breakdown. The actual unit types by bedroom count ratios at 91 Bedford are the opposite of what the consultants have advised should be used for Chappaqua projections. The DGEIS assumes that approximately 2/3 of units will be 1 bedroom and 1/3 will be 2 bedroom. However, 91 Bedford includes 2/3 2 bedroom units and 1/3 1 bedroom units. I think it's also important to consider whether a 15-year build-out period is the appropriate timeline for this, or whether a shorter timeline should be considered. There are several properties in the hamlet that are either vacant or on the market for sale that could drive rapid development. These include the former Rite Aid site, the former church site, the Village Yard, and the Ibiza Britches building. It should also be noted that investor appetite and lender appetite for multifamily properties has increased significantly since the onset of the pandemic, as many banks and investors that historically provided capital to office properties are shifting towards multifamily because of uncertainty in the office market and work from home trends post-pandemic. There are also a number of projects either recently delivered or under construction in Pleasantville as evidence of how fast development can occur and how several projects can be under construction simultaneously. Lastly, as it relates to school issues, I think key considerations and outstanding questions in my mind are whether the town can actually regulate bedroom types and whether 1 bedroom plus dens will actually in effect be 2 bedrooms, and whether there will be tax abatements potentially imposed by an IDA, whether the school district and town board would have approval rights over such abatements. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my feedback this evening.
Thank you, Ben. The next person with their hand raised is Becca Valois.
Becca, please unmute yourself.
Hello?
Hi, Becca, we can hear you.
Great, thanks. Hi, this is Becca Valois, 149 King Street. For a while now, the town board has mentioned 149 King Street and that we're in your vision and that you're looking out for us. Can you be specific on what that actually means? When I see the town board's renderings, I see buildings higher than my 2nd floor window, which includes the blocking of my bedroom, the blocking of my bathroom, my bedroom, and removes my view of the mountainside and sunsets and eliminates my privacy completely. This is not what I expected when I purchased this townhouse, nor could I have imagined this happening. I'm unbelievably concerned for myself and my neighbors, not just the neighbors at 149 King Street, but the neighbors on Greeley Avenue who will get cleared out for these towering buildings. You call it 4 stories, but the maxed out ceilings and roofs tower over us. This is not protection at all. We will basically be boxed in like Smurf Village to these large buildings. I don't feel we're being looked out for, although we haven't heard what that means. I haven't been asked how I feel about building around me. I'm sad, I'm frustrated, and I'm stressed, very stressed. At least 2 neighbors are now looking to sell their units earlier than planned because of this. And I can't stop thinking about where we will have to go because we couldn't stay in Chappaqua. This is where I belong. This is the school system that my son deserves to be in. And I didn't buy this townhouse to be boxed in by much taller buildings. Is that what you would want at your house? Thank you for your time. I truly hope you're hearing how concerned we are in the most stressful time of our lives. I really look forward to hearing how 149 is actually being protected. Thank you.
Thanks, Becca. And I would actually just direct you to take a look at the town board work session from November 24th, which is the work session at which the town board discussed our concerns specific to 149 King Street. And, we, I think, would share the concerns that you have raised here tonight. And it is among the things that we have asked our consultants to take a look at. And one of the reasons that we're very excited to potentially close the public hearing tonight is because we look forward to getting the results of our consultants' expert analysis as a part of the sort of ongoing process that we're in right now. So I know it feels like you've been raising this issue and not getting a response. And that's why we are eager to turn the page and continue to move forward so that we can get some real responses for you. The next person with their hand raised is Suzanne Chazen.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Hi, Suzanne.
Great. Hi, Ivy. My name is Suzanne Chazen. I live at 20 Ludlow Drive in Chappaqua. I'm a 23-year resident with 1 child still in the school district and another who has graduated. I'd like to start. I thought we were going to be talking a lot about the school stuff. So assumptions matter. Without the right assumptions, 2 people can measure the water levels on a beach and say it's low tide, or they can look up and say, hey, there's a tsunami out there. Our community is about to face a tsunami in the form of legislation that will turn our primarily 2-story bucolic hamlet into a dense 4-story, 50-foot wall of massive soulless apartment buildings whose construction will clog our roads, pollute our air, as Tara mentioned, destroy our small retail, and make easy, free parking downtown a thing of the past. But most of all, I'd like to talk about how these new buildings will cost the rest of us money. As Ben Herman pointed out, the DGIS makes it sound as if 3/4 of this new construction will be 1-bedroom or smaller, 72%, I believe. But there is absolutely no basis to presume that. First of all, nothing in the code mandates that has to be that way. And secondly, every single recently developed building in town, from Conifer to 91 Bedford to Chappaqua Crossing Apartments, has more 2-bedrooms than 1-bedrooms. And even some of those 1-bedrooms aren't 1-bedrooms. The 91 Bedford buildings, 1-bedrooms, are a bedroom plus a den, which is basically a 2nd bedroom without a closet. So what does this all mean? It means that the developers are going to build buildings to bring in families with children. Why? Well, people move to Chappaqua for the schools, plain and simple. And if you don't say that's your opinion, here's the simple comparison. I looked at all the state educational data that shows just how prominently Chappaqua public schools figure into the reason people live here. We are currently, as we all agree, at our lowest enrollment in a decade. And yet, even at our lowest enrollment, 1 in 5 Chappaqua School District residents is a school-age child attending the public school system. Now, let's compare this to some of the towns that we call comparable, or at least the town board is called comparable: Ossining, Yorktown, Tarrytown. In those school districts, public school children account for only 13 to 16% of the total population in those towns. What are the other school districts heavily favored by families? Scarsdale, where 1 in 4 residents is a member of the school system. Byram Hills, Armonk, where nearly 1 in 5. And yet, Scarsdale and Byram Hills are never mentioned when we're talking about comparable towns. Our schools are our draw. The developers know this, and they will build primarily 2 and 3 bedroom units to take advantage of this. So everything that the DGIS is predicated on this notion that 72% of the units will be 1 bedrooms or less, just doesn't fly, which means that we're going to have a lot more kids. The other thing is good schools cost money. Chappaqua, Scarsdale, and Byram Hills spend between $36,000 and $42,000 per year per student. That is 20 to 80% more per student than Ossining, Yorktown, Tarrytown, and Mamaroneck. Where is this money for the new students going to come from? It's not going to come from the new renters and the condo owners. I did a quick survey, and we all know that Chappaqua condo owners typically pay about 40 to 50% as much in tax as owners of single-family homes. Rental burdens are typically similar to condos, so we're figuring that every child coming into the district on a rental or a condo is going to be, their families are going to be paying 40 to 50% of the tax of the single-family homeowners.
Suzanne, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You've gone over the 3 minutes. If you could wrap up, please.
All right, I'd like to just say we just have seen more money per more student is a better school system. So one of the things we have to remember is that when we're talking about this notion of, the schools have fewer kids, we are talking about the fact that our schools will decline if our enrollments go up much more than we believe it will, and our revenues go down. And I'd also like to make one more point and just ask that the town board please keep the hearings open until the Board of Ed comes up with their final iteration on the report. That was only their initial, and I think that the public has a right to hear and to comment again when the Board of Ed has its final iteration. That was only their first. So thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person with their hand raised is Allison Slaughter.
Ivy, I just want to add
I'm sorry.
Take a clarity, Ms. Chazen. When we received the materials from the school, they actually sent it to us as an attachment as final. And I believe when I was watching the work session with the public, I believe someone asked at the end about engaging their consultants, and maybe it was Ms. Tipp, I'm not sure, said it seemed to hem and haw about whether or not the consultants were going to be involved anymore, and that Dr. Chow was going to be addressing some of the questions. But we received it as final initially, although it's not labeled as such now. So I don't know what changed after that meeting.
Thanks, Jeremy. Pam,
Yeah, Ms. Slaughter, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, hi, Allison. If you
Great.
can state your name and organization for the record, please.
Absolutely. Good evening. My name is Allison Sloto. I'm with Sive Paget and Roselle, and I'm here on behalf of the Chappaqua Central School District Board of Education. And I'll keep my comments pretty brief. The January 13th joint work session between the school board and the town board was a first look at the data from the school board's consultants. In the spirit of partnership, the school board wanted to include the town board in this first look. And it's worth noting that because it did take some time to develop custom multipliers, conduct a school-wide capacity study, et cetera, the school board only received this set of information from its consultants not very long before we had that joint meeting with the town board. Ms. Charney Hull's comments during her work session regarding the slide deck used at the joint session are correct. It's a slide deck. It was intended to be a presentation to provide an overview of the first look at the data that the school district's consultants have come up with. And that slide deck itself is not to be considered a final report. To maybe hopefully clear up some confusion, the slide deck was noted as final because that was the final version of the presentation that was to be given to the town board and at the public meeting. The understanding between both boards at the meeting was that we require more time to review the information. and are still in the process of analysis, feedback, clarifying questions to get to the relevant data that represents the potential impacts of the draft form-based code on the school district. And so the school board hopes to complete this process prior to the end of the written comment period, if you close the public hearing this evening, within that following 30 days. And we will share the final document and written comments with the town board and community at that time.
Thank you, Allison. For clarity, when did the school board receive the not final version of the report that was presented on the 13th?
So the very first, set of data that was presented to the school board was at a work session that it was not more than a week prior. So it truly was, not a lot of time for the school district to be fully processing the data before the joint session with the town board. But
well, as you may know, the town board received it 2 hours before the joint meeting.
Right.
So to the extent that there wasn't enough time to review it adequately in advance of the joint meeting, I would just request moving forward more than 2 hours for the town board to be able to review a 61 slide presentation and to be able to provide real-time feedback on the same. Earlier this evening, the town board sent an invitation to the school board. And so if you can check back with your clients on that, we offered and would like to propose to meet 2 weeks from tonight on February 2nd to continue our discussion. And I'm very grateful to hear that the Board of Education anticipates being able to complete their work and their comments prior to the close of the public comment period. That is welcome news. Jeremy, you seem like you want to jump in.
Yeah, just a question and a statement. The statement is, again, I have to watch the second public engagement session, work session, because my recollection is that specifically it was referenced about keeping the consultants on, and that didn't appear to be the situation, that the BOE would be responding to future issues. So if maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I'll rewatch that. Number two, maybe you can answer the question, Ms. Soto. Was there any legal impediment that would prevent the school district from redistricting as opposed to building on to a school? Because back in December of 2019, when the issue arose, came about in terms of Chapel Crossing, it was stated that we've done this in the past in terms of redistricting. We could always redistrict here if necessary. But then in that meeting, it was stated that by Ms. Tipp that the school district would potentially have to build and they couldn't redistrict. So are you aware of any legal impediment that's changed since 2019 until now?
So to address your first question about the statement by the school board about the consultants and their continuing role, the school board wanted to make it clear that their consultants are focusing only on the issues that impact the school district specifically. And so, to the extent that there were, follow-up questions or, additional data that needed to be produced, that their consultants were not necessarily going to be doing continuing studies. However, the consultants are certainly still engaged and will, be there for the school board in looking at the data that has been produced and in finessing that data and clarifying any questions that people have about that data. So it was not to say that the consultants are completely finished, but only to make the point that the school board is cognizant of, use of funds and will not be engaging in further study that seems to be unnecessary. And regarding your second question about the redistricting, I am environmental and secret counsel to the school district. And so off the top of my head, I'm not going to opine on the legality of a redistricting, but I will certainly note your comment and bring that back to the school board and its attorney who focuses on those issues and, get an answer on that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
We appreciate your appearance here, and I think we also look forward to our next joint work session and being able to talk directly to one another as opposed to through attorneys. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next person with their hand raised is Dora Strauss.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Dora.
Hi, Dora Strauss, 7 Breckenridge Road. I just want to ask the town board to please consider keeping open the public hearing on the DGEIS until the Board of Education completes its review with respect to the consultant report. In their email tonight, the Board of Education made clear that their analysis is not yet done. I suspect that the BOE is going to press their consultants on why they did not use a multiplier that reflects the top quality of the school district. Many people, including the BOE itself early on, and as well as I did, criticized the DGEIS consultants for failing to use such a multiplier. And now the BOE's own consultants made the same unfortunate mistake. I don't believe any analysis which leads to a prediction of the number of school children generated by 997 apartments at whatever unit mix is accurate without use of a multiplier that takes into account the fact that we live in a very desirable town because of our high-performing school district. The BOE consultants did not undertake any such analysis. They used a multiplier that merely looked at the surrounding geographic area, which in fact includes several low-performing school districts. And this is the primary reason, I think, why the BOE consultants' number of only 150 new students is so close to the 96 predicted by the DGEIS consultants. Without taking into account the fact that Chappaqua is a highly desirable place for families due to the schools, both numbers, whether it's 96 or 150, remain artificially deflated due to use of an incorrect multiplier. In any event, the BOE says it is still working with its consultants on certain questions, likely such as this one, and has not yet presented its final conclusions. In fairness to the public, I ask that the public hearing on the DGEIS not be closed until the BOE presents its final document and the public has a chance to review and comment upon it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person with their hand raised is Greg Bresner.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Hi.
Hi. Good evening, everybody. Greg Bresner, 7 Green Lane in Chappaqua. My concern from the January 13th joint meeting is that the town board case presented assumes a high 2/3 percentage of the total 997 units as 1 bedrooms, which I don't believe is reflective of the higher percentage of 2 and 3 bedrooms that will likely be planned by developers. I have written to the school board to provide sensitivities on the impacts of a higher percentage of 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, as they can result in substantially increased projected enrollment. Given that more than 90% of the budgetary costs per student are variable, the taxpayer actually benefits from declining enrollment in the form of lower budgets and lower tax levies than would have otherwise been had enrollment not declined. I don't believe capacity and space are the appropriate ways to metric a school district where educational costs are largely variable. There are very few economies of scale in a classroom. In 2010, the Chappaqua Crossing DGIS and the school board's consultants included a second compounding component of student generation from the intra-town movement of empty nesters into local apartments and the sale of their single-family homes to families with children. The school board consultant at the time concluded this could represent nearly 50% of total student generation because the availability of local apartments accelerated this type of intra-town movement within the projection period. I have asked the school board to incorporate the effects of this compounding force in their projected student enrollment. My last point, I submitted certain FOIL requests on November 23rd And I would ask that they, if possible, they could be expedited. I have not received them yet. But that's it. That's all I have. Thank you very much for taking my call here.
Thank you for your comments, and I'll ask you to follow up offline with our town clerk, Christina Papes, with regard to the FOIL requests.
Thank you.
The next person with their hand raised is Dan Soloway.
Good evening. Thanks for allowing me to talk. I said at the last meeting, last Zoom meeting, that I was enthusiastic about positive change in Chappaqua, and I still am. I would love to support the form-based code, but my own personal experience recently is telling me that the zoning and the code isn't the issue. I really feel specifically that the real estate ownership is the issue here, and I'll explain. When I call a property owner, not their manager and not their agent, and they say they don't want a restaurant in their building and that they're getting a dentist as a tenant, I realize they're not part of our community, even if they've lived in Chappaqua for 45 years. Our community is saturated with services that are redundant, and we're lacking in areas which our building owners don't want. This is not the first owner who's told me that they don't want a restaurant in their space. In fact, another restaurant that closed, that building owner wants to put in an accounting firm. I can't see how Chappaqua becomes vibrant by rejuvenating town and allowing any amount of stories of building. If you even said, no, we're gonna have a moratorium, everything has to be 1 and 2 stories. If no restaurants and no ability to increase vibrancy at night to bring people into this town, aside from the schools, it will all be for naught. Nobody comes to Chappaqua for a dentist. Nobody's coming to Chappaqua for restaurants either. And that's what we need to be thinking about. And I think that part of what should be considered is something that was brought up in a meeting I had with Rob Greenstein some years ago with some other business leaders, was we need to be having changes that prevent property owners from having their way. This is the form-based code actually gives property owners their way again. We need to look for the other stakeholders in town. Right now, the stakeholders I look at are property owners, people who own residences, people who operate businesses, the school. That's our community. And so we have to be taking, everybody has to benefit. There has to be positive change for all. I think that if owners want to come into town and have a bank in their space, another place to get your hair done, another real estate office, another place to drop off your dry cleaning, or a dentist, that is not an owner we need in Chappaqua. We need people who want to be part of our community and benefit our community. And right now, I don't think a dentist is benefiting our community. That's just one example. So I'd love to see positive change. I'd love to work with you on positive change. I think that right now, I don't want to see any change where building owners are going to rejuvenate their P&L and not town. Appreciate you letting me have the opportunity to speak. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dan. The next person with their hand raised is Nava Kat.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, we can.
Hi, my name is Nava Katz. I live at 319 North Greeley Avenue. And this is my statement. I have children in the back. In the FAQ page on the Newcastle website about the form-based code, it is written, this legislation is not a construction project. This form-based code offers opportunities for property owners to reinvest and redevelop their properties. Reinvest and redevelop means construction. Unequivocally, this legislation is incentivizing property owners to build. If property owners reinvest and redevelop via construction, that means people currently living in these properties will have to move out or will be severely compromised. That includes families with children in our district. I've read nothing that mentions the effects this legislation would have on families that currently live in town. And if I missed that, please highlight that for me. Chappaqua 2017 comprehensive plan, which the FBC is hoping to fulfill, quote, identified the need for the community to diversify its housing type from a single family community to one that offers more options for our younger and older residents. Is there a legitimate demand from a demographic of people under the age of 30 without children, as well as empty nesters who want to rent 1 or 2 bedroom apartments in the downtown strip of Chappaqua? Even if there is this demand, will people who live in apartments with rents that satisfy the quote, Westchester County's affordable housing recommendations be shopping in our high-end luxury stores, so much so that it revitalizes downtown? In the DGEIS report, it states that, quote, the form-based code itself will not have any direct impacts on the community facilities and services. Use of the phrase, quote, the form-based code itself echoes previous statements by the board claiming the FBC is merely legislation. However, legislation directly incentivizes developers. We cannot simultaneously pass laws that encourage bigger buildings and population changes in order to revitalize a town while also claiming community facilities won't be impacted. Finally, many of us saw the video clip on Facebook of a meeting between the board and the developers when crude jokes were made about how rich this legislation will make the developers. Watching them laugh about this on a publicly recorded video raises suspicion. In conclusion, my concerns are, what is going to happen to the families who currently live downtown already? Where is this demand for small apartment rentals from 20-somethings and empty nesters coming from? Will the town board pass this legislation even if the school board, fire station, and library present legitimate evidence-based concerns? And who really stands to benefit from this legislation? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next person with their hand raised is Mariana. I'm not going to try Mariana. You're going to have to help me with your last name.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I can, thanks.
My name is Mariana Lurjudai, and I live at 64 Pheasant Run in Millwood. I'm a 10-year resident of Newcastle, and I actually have 20 years experience preparing financial presentations for one of the world's largest marketing communications companies. I attended the joint work session of the Town Board and Board of Education last week. Although the Town Board seems intent on giving the public the impression that the DGEIS maximum build out and the form-based code will have minimal impact on the Chappaqua schools, it is my understanding that the public has raised significant questions that need further study by the district's consultants. The school district has not yet submitted its final comments on the DGEIS, and I would like the opportunity to review that analysis once it is submitted and to comment on it at a further public hearing. In addition, the consultant's report notes that if the composition of 1-bedroom units skews even slightly, the number of additional school-age children dramatically increases. The town board should look carefully at those numbers and the ratio of 1- and 2-bedroom units and the assumption that there will be no 3-bedroom units before moving forward with the final EIS. Separately, I have other issues with this DGEIS and form-based code. I believe that the code should limit building height to no more than 2 and 3 stories. Town-owned land should be removed from the DGEIS. The town board should wait until the economy normalizes, even slightly, after the country or even Westchester County is vaccinated in order to take into account any changes resulting from this COVID-19 pandemic. The traffic study needs to be updated to reflect current and post-COVID-19 traffic patterns, especially around the Bell Middle School. In sum, please keep the public hearing open until the school district finalizes its comments to the DGEIS and give the community a chance to respond. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. The next person with their hand raised is Leah S.
Yes, nice talking. Hi, this is Leah Sevi. It's 6 Carolyn Lane,
I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to take public comments. I know it's been a number of meetings, and I appreciate all the effort that the town board is putting into this endeavor. And I already submitted a letter back in the fall with a number of issues that you guys have already talked about tonight, and I'm not going to talk about those again. But I just wanted to raise two other things that I'm concerned about. And the first one is we have a few new residential developments that have recently been built or are in the process of being built. And I would just ask the town that maybe we pause and see what happens with those developments, how many students are brought into the district from them, how they affect traffic in town, what the impact on life in Chappaqua is from those new developments before we add additional multifamily developments into the town. We have our own little test case going on right now, and we can take the opportunity to see the results of that before we add additional development. And the second is I'm concerned about how the proposed developments are going to affect the cost of living for the single family homeowners in town. As many people have talked about, there's going to be an increase in the student population. How much is not really clear, but that cost is going to be borne in large part by the current property owners in town. And I'd like to see a further evaluation of the impact that's going to have, how much the cost of living is going to increase in Chappaqua, and what effect that will have on how desirable Chappaqua is. We're trying to keep this town desirable both because of its schools, but it has to be affordable, more affordable than Scarsdale, because it's certainly further from the city. If people are going to be commuting into Manhattan, they have to, for a further distance, there has to be something they get for it. So I would just like to have a further evaluation of what the cost of living increase is going to be as we continue these developments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leah. The next person with their hand raised is Sarah Shapiro. Sarah, we're not hearing you.
Sarah, did you unmute yourself? We're still not hearing you, Sarah.
Should we take the next person and then roll back?
Yep, let's go ahead and do that.
So Ms. Shapiro will be next.
Can we, can someone message Sarah and let her know the number that she can call in on?
Yep, I will.
Thank you.
I will do that.
I believe the next person with their hand raised is Sid Folkson.
Great, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm Sid Folkson. I live at 97 Cross Ridge Road, and tonight I'm going to address the impact of the schools specifically as it relates to class sizes, to overcrowding, and the damage that overcrowding will do to our children. Even if you assume that the lowest possible impact in terms of the numbers of added kids to the district, which many have called into question as incomplete, including the Board of Ed in their email this afternoon and through their attorney just moments ago, as they noted, the work is preliminary. Class sizes will increase. The analysis the school's consultants shared showed that class sizes at Target were in some cases over 30% higher than today's class sizes. These class sizes would quickly become a reality under the FBC even before new school facilities are required. As an example, based on the CCSD's 2021 budget analysis presented last spring, the enrollment/class sizes at Roaring Brook in the second grade is an average of 18.8 students per class. Under the FBC, these sizes would increase 33%, at Grafflin, 20%, at West Orchard, 15%. I looked at every class size K through 4 at all 3 elementaries and compared them with the target class size in the consultant's report. There are very few instances where the increases are less than 20%. And those examples are predominantly in kindergarten and first grade, where enrollment has been increasing over the past few years, which was also evidenced in the report. These class size increases will have a very real and detrimental impact on our children over the long term. The most well-known and respected large size longitudinal study on class sizes at the K through 3 level is Project STAR, often cited by the NEA. Students in class sizes of 13 to 17, which is today's reality, as compared with 22 to 25, which would be the reality under the FBC, were on average 2 months ahead of their peers and at an 8 to 9% advantage on reading and math scores. The effects extend well past early primary years, demonstrating superior performance even through 7th grade in both subject matter and social skills. This quantifies the degradation in the performance of our school system because of the FBC. Parents in this district do not want to sacrifice their children's education while developers get richer. As evidence of that, just 2 years ago, when the CCSD considered removing first grade teacher at Roaring Brook, over 2/3 of the parents who had rising first graders signed a letter expressing concern. These same parents have not changed their priorities because the town board wants a Panera to come in. This opposition shouldn't be a surprise. Randy Katchis, developer and member of the Downtown Working Group, even said the school board will be mad and then shrugged. So it begs the question, why are you marching forward? Residents are opposed to this. Why aren't you taking that as a sign that you need to engage more fully the community? Burying 2-sentence updates in the middle of a too long didn't read email blast appears to be an effort to hide this initiative rather than to make people aware. Where are your yard signs?
Sid, you've gone over your 3 minutes. If you could please wrap up.
Okay, sure. Where has there been any offline effort to seek input from your constituents? Once again, I urge the town to wait. We are at the height of a pandemic. Please keep the public comment period open until the Board of Ed has been able to complete their analysis and until more robust feedback from the community and analysis can be done.
Thank you very much for your comments. The next person with their hand raised is Mary Ann O'Connor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. I live at 1070 Hardscrabble Road. My husband and I are 18-year residents of Chappaqua. We have 2 sons in the Chappaqua Central School District. The town board should keep the public hearing open until after the community is able to review the final public comments made by the Chappaqua Central School District and Board of Education. Following the presentation to the Board of Education last week, it was abundantly clear that the district's consultants may not have had all of the relevant information needed in order to more accurately provide projections of school enrollment to the district. As one example, the school district consultants based their analysis in part by including New Rochelle and Mount Vernon on the list of comparable towns. I do not think there is any resident in town who will have confidence in any projections that are based on the assumption that Mount Vernon or New Rochelle are comparable school districts to Chappaqua. And if the town board members are truly acting in the interest of residents, it would question this analysis. I would also like to add a comment about consensus, since that topic came up earlier during the work session tonight by one of the town board members. If the board is genuine about getting consensus, let's hold off the form-based code vote until it's placed on a community-wide referendum in effect would be the next election in 10 months or 6 months if there is a primary. What's the rush if we're searching for consensus? I've heard the board say that as long as new voices and new comments keep coming in, that the public hearing would stay open. There have been many new voices and comments this evening, and new and varied written comments continue to be submitted. In sum, if the town is in fact listening with open hearts and open minds, it should be willing to provide the public the opportunity to comment on the school district's final findings at a further public hearing. Thank you for considering my comments this evening.
Thank you, Mary Ann, for your comments.
Ivy, can I just clarify, because I think she was mentioning me. I never said consensus. I don't know that that is ever possible in any new legislation. What I did say was I thought it was important for everyone to work together and hear from all opinions and make sure that this isn't a contentious process, but it's more of a collaborative process. So I just wanted to highlight that again.
Thanks, Lisa. The next person with their hand raised, Andrea Sanseverino Gallon, and I'm sorry, the rest of your name is cut off.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Supervisor Poole. I'm Andrea Sanseverino Gallon de Preda. I live at 2 the Lane in Chappaqua, and my husband and I, we have a fifth grader at Seven Bridges. I'm speaking tonight as a follow-up to my open letter to the Town Board, CCSD, Board of Education, and the community dated Thanksgiving Day 2020. This letter called for an open and inclusive dialogue between the Town Board residents and all stakeholders to bridge the chasm caused by what is surely a periodic issue of the form-based code. And since I wrote that letter, we've seen an even deeper level of distrust and a collapse of civil debate in our community, perpetrating a terrible loss for us all. And now more than ever, at the height of a global pandemic, economic devastation for many, and a political and social crisis, we need the balm of our community and neighborly care to sustain us. And we need you, our elected town board, to be visionary and nimble, inclusive and responsive, and above all, to be accountable and to hold yourselves to the integrity your role as public servants obliges, and to unify our community. Sadly, this has not been our experience with the Form-Based Code Initiative. We know that members of the working group and the town board's key advisors are interested parties, namely the developers and consultants who will profit from the spoils of the overdevelopment of Newcastle at the expense of existing residents, and it will obliterate the character of the community. The absence of collaboration and coordination with CCSD and the Board of Education as key stakeholders is indefensible. My concerns range from the increased taxes that will drive many existing residents from their homes, a decline in the quality of education with a rapid influx of students and insufficient infrastructure and resources to support it, constant construction, environmental issues, a lack of understanding about the transformation of the retail industry and how to address existing empty retail, and a loss of public land. The fact remains that despite your proclamations that the form-based code is a draft and will be modified, there is no active dialogue about how. There's simply presentation. And it blithely ignores that the town board is marching towards a form-based code at the height of one of the greatest social, economic, and public health crises of our time. And for me, this begs the question why or who will benefit from the form-based code. A review of the 2019 Town Board Working Group referenced this evening reveals even more starkly the absence of community engagement and shockingly the profit mongering that is a driving force behind the form-based code. The question of why has never been effectively answered by the Town Board. We've heard many disparate ideas to revitalize downtown, to create more affordable housing, to bring more diverse housing and residents. It is an ever-changing goal. The way to address important issues such as social equity or racial justice cannot be tackled by allocating 5% of 400 or even 1,000 units as affordable housing. This requires a level of ongoing in-depth collaboration and coordination across the entire community with the town board, CCSD, Board of Ed, and with many other public and private stakeholders, and that is astonishingly absent with this town board. The siloed nature and actions of the town board have led to adversarial rather than collaborative, amplified efforts to address some of the greatest questions we face as a community, and it must change in response to the sustained, intense, and vehement responses of the community, and indeed the Board of Ed and other stakeholders. What is also conspicuously absent in this entire discussion is an articulated vision for Newcastle, grounded in the values of our community and an understanding of how to tackle the larger challenges we're facing, from economic uncertainty and the transformation of retail to issues of social equity, as part of a collaborative, inclusive, and open dialogue to forge a collective vision for Newcastle. The way forward
Andrea,
towards—
I'm sorry
yes.
to interrupt you. You've reached the end of 3 minutes. If you can wrap up, please.
I will, thank you. The way forward towards responsible, informed change is to pause this form-based code and hold a charrette to allow all the diverse voices of Newcastle to be heard and to influence the future of our community, and to allow the country and the community to begin to normalize post-COVID-19. I implore the town board to uphold your duty to all residents. Do not betray us or your own integrity by continuing to barrel forward toward an obliteration of the character and fabric of the community that can never be undone. Thank you very much.
The next person with their hand raised is Shale Highbloom.
Hi, actually, this is Steve Kemmler, and I think Shale helped me set my Zoom up at one point. And so I guess that's the name that's coming across. Anyway, I am Steve Kemmler. I live on Aspen Road. I attended Grafflin, Bell, Greeley, recently moved back to town. I have 2 children who are going to go through the school system, and my parents still live here. So I have just a few ties and many, many friends throughout the town. I've been an active environmental advocate in a pretty significant way for over 2 decades. I'm also a developer, and I've been a major partner or the sole developer in over 2,000 units of single and multifamily housing across the country, not in this area. I first want to discuss the school district report, and a lot of my comments are based on having done extensive demographics, for my work and what I do over a real period of time. But more importantly is I just look around at my neighborhood and my street. There's been a ton of new people move in over the last year. They all have kids, all of them. So I called up one of the leading brokers in town and I said, okay, how many people have kids over the last year who moved to town? 90%. I said, oh, there's 10% who actually don't have kids. She said, they're all planning on having them. So the number they came up with of 150, let me just say, based on all my experience in the neighborhood, my experience as a developer, defies common sense. If you want the number, just add a 0 to that. There is no way that it is anything like 150. The developers, if it were me, I'm going to develop, which I'm not going to develop here. I would be adding, it would be 2 and 3 stories. As people brought up, the den will be a bedroom. And I'm going to market this as you can pay a really low rate and have some of the best schools in the country. The schools are great here. I just moved back to town. But we're going to be subsidizing all these people moving in. Unfortunately, there's no way it approaches 150. And I work with a ton of consultants. They're often really wrong. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But that's probably not even my greatest concern. I've got a ton of environmental concerns, energy efficiency, what's going to be required, blocking light, waste, water, traffic construction. I think the taxes are going to go up for single family folks and homeowners to pay for increased student loads and for the parking garages. But honestly, even beyond all of that, is I fundamentally want to understand, I don't understand, why would the town do this? We have this beautiful town that's been around for 250 years. I built 5-story buildings and parking garages. They are not nice for a town like this. They don't fit in. You will not be happy. There's almost no one on this call listening or anyone in town who's going to, when they actually see what a big group of 5-story buildings looks like, and even if it's 2 garages, it will fundamentally change the character of this town. It won't be it will still be called Chappaqua, but it won't be Chappaqua. And so I looked at the DGS, the planning board's report on the DGIS says 4 and 5-story buildings enhance community character, but it doesn't, the DGIS says that that is the case, but does not make the case, nor can it, that is true, because you can't. It should be recognized there's a fundamental difference between a 1- 2-story townscape and 4- or 5-story one. There's no way around this one. This is all from your own planning board. Community character will change visually.
Mr. Kemmler, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You've reached the end of your 3 minutes.
Okay, so real quick, I would just say, I really, truly think, and I appreciate what all the town board, I'm sure everyone has good intentions. The appropriate thing, in my opinion, stop, do a charrette, start this over. I think everyone working together could come out with a great solution that benefits all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And thanks for recognizing that we do have good intentions. The next person with their hand raised is Margaret Ferguson.
Hello? Am I unmuted?
You're fine.
I would like to make a request before I start my prepared comment. The prepared comment is on behalf of the not-for-profit of which I'm president, and I believe it times out at just about 3 minutes. But I would like a couple minutes at the end to speak as an individual, a 34 or 33-year resident of this town, as an empty nester, based on some of the things I heard here. They're off the top of my head. They're not elaborate comments, but I would like to make them.
All right, let's get going.
We'll do it. Just give me 1 second here, please. Okay. I speak tonight on behalf of a local grassroots not-for-profit, Residents United to Save Chappaqua Hamlet, In our January 11th letter, we implored this board, as have others implored this board tonight, to pause the form-based code process until residents and other stakeholders are able to come together to participate in a charrette, which is a multi-day design workshop focused on what we, the community, collectively want for our hamlet. It is widely acknowledged that a form-based code is only appropriate if it implements a community's vision for its future. This was even recognized in the town's 2018 RFP, which said a charrette was needed to obtain maximum hamlet input so as to produce the best possible plan on which to base the new form-based code. Yet here, the proposed code does not reflect what the community wants because no charrette was ever done. The community has never been brought together face-to-face to collaborate, engage in design decision-making, and come to a consensus about how the hamlet should evolve. Instead, the form-based code before us came out of a small downtown working group that included 2 local developers who own property in the hamlet and an architect who works for one of the developers. Now, this board has taken the stance that the massive flaws in that developer-friendly code will be addressed by the board, taking comments from individual residents who can't even see each other, let alone collaborate as to community consensus, by the board talking with its hired pro-developer consultants, and finally by the board deciding on what changes to make to the code. However, this process is wrong. It is wrong because no charrette has happened, and so no community vision has been articulated. In its place, all decisions as to how our hamlet will look, feel, and function for the next 40 years will reflect the individual mindsets of just you 5 people. They will be filtered through your individual life experiences and values. This is not how a good form-based code is done. To be blunt, this is wrong because it is not for any individual or small group. Not me, not Residents United, not the Downtown Working Group, not you, Lisa, not you, Lauren and Laurie, not you, Jeremy, not you, Ivy, not for anyone to make decisions about the collective future of our hamlet. The only way to do this right is for decisions about the hamlet's developmental future to be the result of community consensus. And the collaboration that will lead to such a Newcastle consensus can only emanate from a charrette. In closing, we again implore this board to do what is right for the town. You have the power to pause this radical plan so that we as a community can find common ground for a hamlet that we will be proud of. By doing that, the possibilities will be endless and the results will be so much more than the pro-developer, residential and garage heavy, tired and uninspired plan before us now. We again implore you to take the just road, do the right thing, and turn the design decisions that will guide our hamlet for the next 40 years back to the people where such decisions belong. That is the end of my not-for-profit comment. And if you bear with me, my personal comments are as follows. After listening to all the discussion of the Board of Ed materials tonight, my husband and I have lived here, I think this is our 33rd, 34th year, but we are empty nesters. From our front step, we can see 4 other houses that are currently empty nesters. That's 5 houses in about a 2 suburban block area. We could easily fit 15 kids in these houses, if not more. My point is, I want to stay here. I've been here. I will get emotional because I want to stay here, but we cannot stay here if the taxes go up. And I respectfully request that this board not close this public hearing until a reasonable amount of time after the Board of Education has come up with whatever its final report is. I am entitled to see that as a taxpayer, especially one of longstanding. It makes sense. It's only fair. We have to be able to comment on that in a knowledgeable way. For the Board of Ed to come up with documents at the end of the 30-day written comment period is no help at all to residents who want to make comments. So I make a specific request that the public hearing process not close tonight, that it be extended for another 30 days. At that point, the written comments of the Board of Ed will be available, and I ask for the written comment period to follow the close of the public hearing by 30 days. There is no rush here. We should have the chance to look at these complicated figures and weigh in knowledgeably. It is our right as taxpayers. And I would ask you to make that clear tonight, that the hearing is not closing tonight. And I would ask you to make clear that the written comment period will be extended 30 days beyond March 18th. I'd have to do the math, but that's what I'm asking. Please take my position into account. I want to stay here. I'm not sure I can.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ferguson. If you can wrap up, please.
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Pam, if we can try to bring Sarah Shapiro back into the conversation.
Yeah, she's back down there, so let me see if I can get her in. Sarah, can you unmute yourself?
I tested my microphone.
There you are.
Sorry about that. My name is Sarah Shapiro, and I live very, very close to the area that you are trying to rezone. My house is next door to the library on Smith Street. Specifically, it is 23 Smith Street. I have one third grader at Grafflin and another that will begin there as a kindergartner this fall. I am opposed to the form-based code for multiple reasons. I think that is far too broadly written and will lead to a rash of development that we are unable to control. I've spoken once before, and tonight I will focus on what I heard less than a week ago at a presentation by the consultants hired by our Board of Ed. As a resident with children that will spend the next 9 years at either Grafflin or Bell, I am very concerned about how many new students the code will allow into our district. I'm going to quote an ad from Admiral Realty for a development site in the area you are seeking to rezone. It reads, Chappaqua is considered one of Westchester's elite suburbs. Horace Greeley, Chappaqua High School is ranked number 24 out of 1,290 high schools in New York State. It seems to me that our schools are already being used as sales tools. 2 sets of consultants have tried to estimate how many new students we can expect, but neither has factored in the elite status of our schools. So I'm hesitant to rely too heavily on those projections. The Board of Ed's consultants admitted that the data set is simply too small. Affluent towns with elite schools don't have much multifamily housing. So if we can't come to an accurate estimate, we can still use logic and common sense. The code does not restrict the number of multi-bedroom apartments that may be built. I think that the developers will capitalize on what we prize above all else, our schools. And therefore, the vast majority of the apartments that will be built will be sized for families. I know that Grafflin and Bell will be the schools that feel the impacts first. And I remember the outrage when my son's grade at Grafflin went from 5 classes down to 4 classes. It wasn't pretty. I ask you, do you think the parents in town know that the FBC could potentially lead to redistricting? I don't think they do. I think that we are in crisis mode and that the average resident doesn't have the mental space for this right now. I know that personally I don't, and it's exhausting trying to keep up with it all. Thank you for your time. Good night.
Thank you. The next person with their hand raised, please, Susan Gonzowitz.
Hi, I live on Paulding Drive. So I have 2 young children who are just starting in the schools. One will be in kindergarten and one will not quite yet, but she'll be there in a couple of years. And we absolutely did move to Chappaqua because of the things that people said, right? The schools, the appearance of the town. But I also think that this is a town that claims social justice as a critical piece of what we stand for, right? If you take, when I walk my dog, I see those Black Lives Matter sign. When I look at our newsletters every week, there's always things from the Committee on Racial Justice. We just hired a new position at our schools. And yet in this moment where we have a systemic opportunity to open our doors and say who has access to our services, we shy away from it in a way that's really concerning. And so if class sizes, I think part of racial equity is recognizing that people in privileged positions have to sacrifice in order to make change. And so if that means class sizes have to get bigger, if that means that my taxes as a single family homeowner may change, but I can live in a more equitable space and I can tell my children that we're making change and that we are no longer an elitist community, there's a power to that. And so while I don't understand fully the rules and regulations that go into who and how and when and why, I do know that the school argument is one that concerns me, because this is a moment where we can say we want to give more access and we are willing to sacrifice a small amount, or it's a moment where we can continue to live in a bubble. And so I want to throw out there that I think creating affordable housing means that we have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to sacrifice in order to invite more people into a community that has a history of being able to to survive, right? Even if you look at our finances in a pandemic, right? We are doing well when others are not. And so it seems like an opportunity to make change in a phenomenal way. No, that's all.
Thank you very much for your comments. Christina, I'm just going to let you know I'm having trouble seeing you. You're going in and out. So if you can just check your camera, and I'll try to keep the time.
Okay, sorry. I had a.
Oh, seems like you're having some wireless challenge or some connectivity.
With having a little issue.
Maybe Tiffany can take over if you're having trouble, Christina.
All somebody has to do is kind of wave at all of us when they get to 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
whatever you prefer, because I can't tell when I'm not broadcasting because I always look live. So whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. Tiffany, can you do double duty for us and maybe just keep an eye on the clock? Okay, and with 30 seconds and a stop.
And while we're taking this technical break, I'll just say for everybody who's in attendance and who's speaking tonight, if I know it's challenging, the 3 minutes. The town board certainly all suffers from being long-winded. And so I feel you on trying to restrict these comments to 3 minutes. That said, we've got a number of people still with their hands raised, and we want to make sure we get through everybody. So thank you for putting up with that. I do want to ask you, if you've got a prepared statement, if you could send it to us, chappaqua@mynewcastle.org. It's tremendously helpful to have that information. And we want to make sure that we capture everything correctly for the public record. Okay, thanks. Pam, the next person with their hand raised is Warren Gottlieb.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
We can. Hi, Warren.
Okay, great. Hi, good evening, everybody. Okay, first of all, just as a prelude, I wanted to publicly recognize the incredible job that the town board has done during the pandemic with respect to keeping us apprised of what's going on with respect to the COVID crisis. But I also want to publicly recognize the outstanding job that the Chappaqua Central School District Board of Education administrators and community have done during what we can all agree is an incredible public health crisis. And they're doing this to continue to educate our children. And to the extent that they are not able to move as fast or as focused as the town board wants with respect to the CCSD's examination of the form-based code, so that they can understand what it will take to meet their commitment, no matter what, to educate every child in the district. I, for one, fully understand that they can't move maybe with the speed and focus with which the town board would like them to move. And I think we need to be a little bit easier on them about that. They have a very full plate and then some. And they have a very big mission right now. And I know all 5 of you have kids in the school district, and I ask for you to keep that in front of mind. In fact, this is exactly why many of us, including me, have pleaded for the town board to put the entire form-based code on hold until the COVID crisis is meaningfully behind us. At a recent meeting, I asked why the form-based code had to proceed forward at this particular point in time. And it was met with an uncomfortable silence, followed by what I thought were really not satisfactory answers. And if the town board insists on proceeding, I believe at a bare minimum, it owes the CCSD Board of Education and administrators and our residents to keep the DGEIS public hearing open so that the Board of Education can complete its data analysis, share its final document with the town board and the community, and give residents an opportunity to engage with the town board at that time. It's not too much to ask. It really isn't. And I think the town board can demonstrate its stated good faith by granting this request. I know a number of people have asked tonight, and I really ask that before this meeting ends, that the town board indicate whether or not they're willing to do that. And finally, I just, on a completely separate note, I do have one question that I would appreciate knowing the answer to. I don't know if maybe it's Sabrina or our consultants, but I would love to know at what point was the specific concept of a form-based code first introduced into the discussion of how to carry out the goals of the comprehensive plan. I just would love to know the answer to that question. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Warren. And we'll have Sabrina follow up with you offline with regard to that specific question. I don't know that she has the data in front of her right now. The next person with their hand raised is Charles Gibb.
Hi, good evening. Charles Gibb. I live in Quaker Lane in Chappaqua. I've got 2 kids at Seven Bridges. We moved here 3 years ago, and we moved here because of the school, because of the environment, because of the charm of the city or of the town, and a desire to get out of the city. I'm not going to say very much tonight because the key thing I'm listening to is that communication is what's heard, not what's said. Communication is what's heard, not what's said. The town boards say they are listening to people, but the people are not feeling heard. And that's what's driving this increase in emotion around this issue. That obviously alongside the pandemic, the health, the political, and all the other crises that are facing the country at the moment. And I understand and I very much appreciate, I'm certain the town board is not interested in having conflict with members of the town. But I would urge them to hear what is being said by their constituents. And I think I would urge us to make sure that we get all the right people around the table talking about this. That the town board and the school seem to be in conflict. It just means that the left and the right hand are not working effectively together. That alongside whether it's the people who understand roads and traffic and parking or fire or the environment, it doesn't seem to be a very coordinated project with a single vision driving everything that's going on. So I, like many others, I'm going to ask that there is a charrette. I'm going to ask that there is a hold on any form of decision making, that we do not close public hearings, and that we actually, dare I say it, go back to the start and we create a project that actually starts to hear what's being said, and therefore we can take the emotion out of the situation. That's it from me. And again, I know that you guys do not want conflict. I appreciate that, but I think you need to start hearing what's being said. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Gibb. The next person with their hand raised is Gray Williams.
I just unmuted.
We can hear you.
I'm good. All right. Gray Williams. I live at 376 Quaker Road. And I'm also the town historian. I've lived here since the Cretaceous. And in fact, ever since, on and off, since 1937. And I've seen a lot of changes. I'm going to bring up something completely different that hasn't come up before. I was sort of hoping somebody else would bring it up. And that's the last section of the proposed code, which has to do with architectural standards. This came as a surprise to me, and I have already commented publicly and sent in a comment that what it proposes, which is a choice between 5 historic architectural styles and no others, and very rigidly defined with a lot of drawings and so forth. And at the very least, I said that I thought this was a mistake. There was certainly no precedent for it, and that modern architecture should be allowed. But since then, I've come to the conclusion that that section, frankly, does not belong in this legislation. I think it should be dropped. I don't know how it really got there, but I don't think that architectural style really has to do with zoning. I think the two are separate and should be considered separately. I don't think it's a good idea to prescribe a rigid historic precedence. I'm very fond of history. I believe it should be respected, but I don't really think we can try to live in the past and to create a false impression that we're returning to a past when that past never really was, is, I think, mistaken. As I say, I think that you should address this separately. I'm not sure that it lends itself to legislative prescription, and that really you have to trust the planning board and the architectural review board to really determine what is appropriate for downtown. That's all I have to say, but I'll answer questions.
Thank you, Gray. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I'm not hearing any, Gray, but thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
The next person with their hand raised is Susan Comey.
Hey, Ivy, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Susan Comey, 9 Briarcliff Road in Chappaqua. I hope everyone will bear with me a little bit. I'm going to get a little more technical than the last couple of folks before me. As everyone knows, an analysis is only as good as the assumptions that underlie it. 2 of the key assumptions underlying both the DGEIS analysis and the preliminary Board of Ed analysis are: 1, the mix of housing type between 1, 2, 3, or more units, and 2, the multipliers used to determine the number of school-aged kids for a given housing type. As several others before me have mentioned, the number of units used in both the DGEIS and the preliminary Board of Ed analysis are heavily weighted toward 1-bedroom units, an assumption which is unsupported by local analysis of multifamily housing in our area. Furthermore, the multipliers used by both the town board's consultants and preliminarily by the Board of Ed consultants completely fail in both cases to utilize data of communities with high-performing school districts such as ours. They fail to address the reality of our situation, which is that families with more children will disproportionately self-select to live in our community because of the quality of the schools. They also fail to take into account the reality that developers will build units with the highest demand. In our case, larger units for families with children drawn by our amazing schools. Rather than just throw up their hands and say, this is just too hard or it can't be done, like the various consultants seem to have done to date, 2 local residents, Scott and Natalia Levine, did exactly the sort of analysis the consultants have so far failed to do. These residents, one of whom is a PhD data scientist with degrees in advanced math, performed the following analysis. They compiled the actual number of CCSD students from publicly available student directories and the actual number of dwelling units from town property records for the 4 existing multifamily developments in and adjacent to the form-based code district. Using that information, they were able to calculate a local and empirically grounded multiplier of 0.32, which results in an estimated net addition of 321 CCSD students from the new multifamily units contained in the DGEIS. This is more than triple the number of 96 students included in the town board analysis and more than double the number of 150 students in the Board of Ed analysis. This number of 321 reflects local CCSD specific market conditions. It solves both the issues of multipliers and housing mix because it assumes that the future mix of newly built dwellings will and the number of school children per dwelling are consistent with what currently exists in our town today. In short, the consultants who were collectively paid upwards of $500,000 failed to do the analysis. A couple of smart residents with a couple of advanced math degrees and an ounce of common sense were able to do in less than a day for free. This type of analysis is specifically recommended in the Rutgers study. This type of analysis reflects the reality of our situation as a high-performing school district, and this type of analysis results in an expected number of students that is more than double or triple that in the subpar work performed by the paid consultants to date. As per the email today, is my understanding that the Board of Ed is still a work in progress, and is my hope that it will better reflect the reality of our town once it is complete. I request that the public hearing process be kept open until it is. And last, I just want to note that the details underlying the analysis that Scott and Natalia did will be submitted in writing as a public comment for anyone who'd like to better understand them. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Susan. The next person with their hand raised is Victoria Alzapidi.
Hello.
Hi, Victoria. We can hear you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for hosting this session. I live at 65 Seven Bridges Road, and I've lived here for 12 years. And I just wanted to speak to two different points. One is on a more traditional environmental level. I really appreciated the comments that Tara, I believe her name was, made in memory of Linda Zhang and the work she was doing on environmental issues and the climate change report that she shared. The two specific pieces around environment are, I attended a session on urban forests a few days ago by an expert at Penn State who talked a lot about community trees and talked about the importance of having trees of different ages to be, kind of a healthy wooded area in an urban setting. And we've lost so many trees downtown over the past couple of years, a lot of our mature trees, and we have now a lot of very young trees. So I did want to kind of put that on the table that if we continue to take down mature trees, we're going to really kind of compromise the ecological success of our downtown trees. So please think about that. It kind of speaks to a previous point I made that perhaps if any piece of this form-based code goes through, that we might want to not focus on King Street as it goes up the hill, but really look at the bottom of King and the top of King, areas that have already been developed, where there's already a footprint with no trees on it, instead of taking down any additional trees and compromising the view shed on that strip up and down King Street. And the other area is this stream near the library that goes alongside of the gazebo and town hall. That's a more environmentally sensitive area to take into consideration that may lead us to not building anywhere near those areas. And the second piece, really, I guess, someone spoke about this a couple of minutes ago. Here we are the day after Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and a time of reflection to think about where we are as a society. And if anyone looks back at the history of Newcastle in terms of housing and zoning, there's been a lot of pushback over the decades about different types of multifamily housing and other types of use. And we really have not welcomed people from different economic backgrounds. And I do think, we've had a year of challenges around our school system and concerns that we have about race in the schools and students who are different. And I think there really is an opportunity here. When I hear people talk about compromising our schools, having diversity in schools is possibly more educational than what they learn in the classroom. And I think that having apartments, not just with one bedroom, but really with 2 and 3 bedrooms where families will be moving in, I personally am very in favor of that. And I think it would bring a lot of newness to our community and exposure to both the young people and adults, to people who are different than them. And I think as we reflect on how we look as a community, think about if you were someone who's not as wealthy as many of us.
Victoria, I'm very sorry to cut you off, but you've gone over the 3 minutes. If you can wrap up, please.
I will finish. Yeah, I'm sorry. Think about how you would feel listening into these calls. It really struck me today that I want us to be a welcoming community, and we have an opportunity here to find the right way to do this form-based code in a limited capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. The next person with their hand raised is Joanna Coogan.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. My name is Joanna Monjardo Coogan, and I live at 1 Cedar Lane in Chappaqua. I've spoken before about my concerns regarding the impacts on existing small business owners in town who don't own their properties. And I was really happy to hear the town board discuss in your recent work session the possibility of relocation grants and also displacement provisions for those businesses that will be adversely affected by new construction. And I'd like to encourage the town board to legislate those ideas into the form-based code to protect those businesses that would be forced to close otherwise. In that same work session, the town board also discussed the issue of how to promote small businesses over chain retail in the downtown. And although I understand the good intention behind the discussion, I think the fact that it needs to be discussed at all denotes how the current draft of this legislation does not have a development plan with a clear vision for what the hamlet will look like, what it will contain, and how we will achieve those goals. The town's own planning board asked the question in their public comments of December 18th, quote unquote, In what way does the proposed legislation satisfy the articulated community demand for entertainment options that attract community residents and visitors? I would like to pose a similar question. Where's the study that shows that a singular focus on residential housing will create a hamlet in keeping with the town's strategic plan? If we, the community members, were given an opportunity to participate in a town-wide charrette, the form-based code could evolve into a more clear-cut development plan that provides the design the community wants to see, as well as providing the economic growth the hamlet so badly needs. The proposed legislation in its current form lacks the spirit, the ingenuity, and the creativity that comes from engaging the entire community in a town-wide charrette. Look at a community like Hurleyville, New York. It's a small bucolic hamlet. Their community came together and developed partnerships with local government, the Open Space Institute, New York educational system, and they transformed their economically depressed hamlet into a viable, fully integrated Main Street. Some of its major components included a STEAM center, a performing arts center, art galleries, new residences, of course, and specialty mom and pop retail as well. Just imagine how much better this legislation could be. What is it that we, the residents, really want? A STEAM center, a dog park, WeWork space, a community garden, a year-round recreational bubble, a center for cultural diversity. The possibilities are endless. Please consider pausing this process so we can gather together as a community to have a charrette and create a piece of legislation that will make Chappaqua a model for other small towns looking to revitalize and reinvent themselves in positive ways. Don't leave our future in the hands of developers whose bottom line will always come above the best interests of our community. Please empower your constituency. Trust that together we can build a Chappaqua hamlet. I really hope that we can work together because I agree with
Thank you, Joanna, for your comments. You've reached the end of 3 minutes. If you can wrap up, please.
That's it. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person with their hand raised is Michael Weinberg.
Michael, you can unmute yourself.
Michael, we're still not hearing you on this end. Michael, still nothing. We're gonna take you out, and if you want to try to dial back in, we'll take your hand again and move you to the top of the queue. Pam, let's go ahead with the next person with their hand raised is Raymond Sanseverino.
Hi, I'm Ray Sanseverino. I live at 65 Carolyn Place in Chappaqua. I've lived in town for 43 years now. Have 2 adult daughters who went through the school system and have a 13-year-old who is a 7th grader at Bell. Your most important constituents are the residents of the town. You've said you're fully committed to taking the time. You want to have collaboration, you're listening, you want what's best for the town. Yet, you've met and spoken with members of the downtown working group who we've all heard people feel have a conflict of interest, 2 developers and an architect who works for one of the developers who own land in town. You limit us to 3 minutes. Zoom is probably the worst way anyone could collaborate. During the COVID pandemic is not, a time when, as countless others have noted tonight, people have their minds on other issues and concerns, and the stress level is high. And that's why I think we're seeing a lot of frustration expressed and a lot of animus expressed in some of the social media posts. It's because of this. The thing that I dislike intensely is when I see that 30-second sign, or you say, Ivy, 3 minutes. It's just not a way to have a good exchange. It's not a way to hear the community. As the gentleman said earlier today, you say you're listening, but nobody feels like they're being heard. We need a charrette. The authors of the of the form-based code, the Institute for Form-Based Code, say that's necessary to produce the best result. You'll get community buy-in that way. So I urge you to halt the process, have a charrette once the pandemic passes, and we can come together and produce some of the results that Ms. Coogan just alluded to earlier. I came to Chappaqua because of the schools and the small town feel. Like many people who work in Manhattan, I love the respite a quiet little town with its somewhat bucolic feel gives you. If I wanted to live in Scarsdale or Bronxville or Greenwich, I could have moved there. And in the case of the former two towns, have had a better commute. But I did not. You know, as Jeremy Sallin had said at one point, you know, this form-based code, if produced, would be like taking Lower Westchester and putting it in Chappaqua. Not something that interests me, and I suspect not anyone on this call tonight. I don't understand the need for the FBC. I realize there's a desire to revitalize the town, add some affordable housing, but this form-based code is like using an elephant gun to shoot a flea. There are other ways to revitalize the town and add affordable housing other than by this form-based code. If we want to have more racial equity and inclusion, there's ways to do it. Ben Herman has suggested ways previously. We don't have to build 1,000 units to get 100 affordable housing units. We can just have some affordable housing units without all the excess other units. I think before the code.
Ray, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You've reached the end of your 3 minutes. If you could wrap up, please.
Yep. Before the code is adopted, I think you owe it to the residents to tell us where the money will come from to pay for the extra police, water, maintenance of our roads, infrastructure, who's paying for the garages, who's going to pay for the additional kids in school. Even if one were to accept 150, the estimate of 150 additional students at $42,000 per student, that's about $6.3 million. And we know that condos and rentals do not pay the same tax structures single family homes do. And I know people saying, well, we can sacrifice and pay a little bit more, but you know, we shouldn't be asking others, we shouldn't be spending the money of other residents. I think.
Ray, thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate them, and you can certainly submit them in writing to us at chappaqua4@mynewcastle.org. Thank you. The next person with their hand raised is Tara Castle.
Tara, you can unmute yourself. Tara, can you unmute yourself?
Tara, I'm so sorry. We're still having some trouble not hearing anything on this end from you. Yeah, so Tara, I'm sorry. We're going to ask you, we're going to send you some instructions about how to dial in. And then Pam, if we can move on to the next person, which is Michael Weinberg.
Let's see if Zoom doesn't crash this time. Can you hear me?
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay. Mike Weinberg, 54 Touchstone Way. I've lived in New York for 13 years. Thank you for all the work you guys have done. I really appreciate it, and all the time you guys and commitment you've made to making this better place. A couple of comments, kind of unrelated. I'm a little perplexed by some of the cost questions that people are raising, because whether it's 0.2, 0.3, that means there's the opposite of one of that number that isn't having any children and are paying taxes, not to mention the commercial properties which are there, which are also paying taxes to the school. So the idea that the full school tax is borne by just the people who have students doesn't make sense. There's plenty of people who will, buildings that will be there will not have children, will be paying tax. So I think that greatly reduces the cost to the school and the town. One of the things I think the code does need to make sure it incentivizes is the ability to have more restaurants and more music venues and things of that nature and entertainment, so that it's not just apartments, obviously, and we have the ability to have the restaurants, which will bring more people into the town. And I think it's very important to have the code have some sort of environmental standards, given the climate issues and the importance of that to so many of us. And lastly, I think the question of increasing diversity with increasing types of market housing stock is critical. And people seem to forget too that just because a market rate might be as expensive as a one-person house, a single-family house, there's a big difference from people's net worth. You don't have to put down a $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 down payment if you're renting an apartment, even if you have the ability to pay the same amount of mortgage. So I think it's important. It's a different type of person that might be able to move in there. So all that, I am looking forward to hearing the final consultant's report. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Michael. Pam, if we can try to bring Tara Castle. I see her with her hand up again.
Yeah, Tara, can you hear us?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Hi, Tara.
Hi, sorry about that. I had my privacy settings off. So this is Tara Castle at 7 Hilltop Circle, and thanks so much for the opportunity to share our concerns. The form-based code has become an incredibly divisive issue and one that is forcing our community apart at the very time when we should be coming together. I think several people have noted that. I do believe everyone has the best of intentions, but in fact, the work session earlier this evening and the discussion regarding the work of the Board of Education, whose report was not final, and who in my humble opinion has really gone over and above to serve the families of this town during this unprecedented time. It really was a sobering example of the discord in our community. So really appreciate the members of the board who took the time to emphasize collaboration this evening, which is obviously a critical step in the right direction. We appreciate the town board committing to not just hearing, but acting on the concerns of the residents who have taken the time to provide thoughtful commentary and feedback on the proposed solution. And there's a few key aspects that I'd like to call attention to. The focus of our form-based code seems to be continually evolving. And as of late, the proposed code seems to have been primarily positioned as a driver of racial and socioeconomic diversity. I have to say, I've personally witnessed firsthand the incredible generosity of our residents, and I truly believe that Chappaqua is a town that espouses the values of integrity, inclusivity, and diversity. But with its focus on market rate housing, we now know that the form-based code does not achieve such important goals, and rather than benefiting diverse populations in any substantive way, really prioritizes the interests of developers and property owners over families. Many of us have seen the videos where the developers who were invited to shape the Chappaqua code note the opportunities for tremendous profit with obvious glee. And meanwhile, it's important to consider the potential impacts to current residents that may well be adversely impacted by what we're proposing here. And they're really some of the town's most vulnerable. Our children and the quality of their education, residents who could not afford the associated increase in taxes who may be driven from town, and empty nesters whose home is their most significant lifelong investment, who may be unable to sell when our already astronomical taxes increase and really serve to decrease the marketability of the town. We heard that from some of the real estate agents prior to this. Having spent the bulk of my career engaged in development projects, to me, the lack of consensus we're seeing is emblematic of a larger issue. The community as a whole has not been sufficiently engaged in the process of creating a viable solution. I understand that we can point to specific meetings and notifications, but clearly without the benefit of meaningful analysis and stronger visuals and renderings depicting the maximum build out, the majority of the town has no idea of the development that is coming. The form-based code would enable the creation of one of the most densely developed downtowns in northern Westchester and transform Chappaqua nearly overnight from a sleepy hamlet to an urban suburban cluster. Indeed, it is apparent that developers are already preparing to move swiftly should the form-based code be approved. And to me, the supposition that construction would take place slowly over many years demonstrates an unfamiliarity with the economic incentives to bring such projects to market very quickly. Our community has in its citizens an enviable pool of real estate and finance talent with deep subject matter expertise. and coming together in a charrette to drive a collaborative and informed approach to guiding the consultants. I'm really heartened by the prospect that we can evolve the current form-based code to a vision for a dynamic town center that truly delivers the economic, environmental, and socially sustainable outcomes that we can all be proud of. Finally, I would like to request that you keep the public comment period open to give residents the opportunity to fully consider CCSD's final report on the code's impact to our schools. Frankly, I'm not sure how we can close the public hearings in the absence of this. The prospect of increased class sizes, redistricting, and major capital improvements, in addition to substantive tax increases for single-family homeowners, are matters that deserve our utmost consideration before we move forward from an approach that there will be no turning back from. So just to close that, as leaders, I think we all have tremendous respect for you, and we elected you to represent us. And just a reminder that the vision that you ultimately move forward on is going to be your legacy to this town. So hopefully we can come together to drive the result that we're all looking for. And that's all. Thanks.
Ivy, you're muted.
Thanks, Tara. My husband came in to drop off my charger for my laptop because we've been on this meeting for so long, I ran out of battery. So if you saw motion behind me, that's what was going on. We've actually reached the end of the hands that we have. Okay, I said that we'll take these 3 more hands and then we'll conclude. We have C. Moses, then Rob F., then Charles Napoli.
Hi, can you hear me? It's Cynthia Manichurian, Cynthia Moses Manichurian.
Hi, Cynthia. Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, how are you? I was trying to be good about it and wait till all the comments came through in case my comments were covered, but
I appreciate that.
I'm going to add a few. It's very, very interesting. And I wanted to remind whoever is still on the Zoom meeting that it is the town of Newcastle and the hamlet of Chappaqua. And I depend on all of you to represent all of us. And so I want to start by congratulating you all on the swearing in. I watched, it was different to be on Zoom and watch a swearing in, but congratulations to old and new who represent us. And I want to move into the days of the comprehensive plan. And I participated in the comprehensive plan. And to me, it was a holistic vision for the whole town. And in that way, you're now dealing with some very heavy lifting after creating the vision. You're dealing with this form-based code. Clearly, there's a lot of discussion there. The hazard mitigation plan, which I didn't somehow manage to get involved with. I'm not sure if it's kind of done and there's not an opportunity for public comment. And then this Indian Brook Croton Gorge Municipal Watershed Overlay Zone, which you mentioned in your work session. These are all very serious topics, very important for Newcastle. As I listen from the wider perspective about the concerns Chappaqua has for the form-based code, I agree with most people's comments. And I wonder, in terms of all of the services that you will need to provide for this new density, how does that impact on the rest of Newcastle? You mentioned in your work session that you had meetings with fire, ambulance, and school reps. But so Newcastle Fire and ambulance and police and so forth serve all of Newcastle. When you load up density in Chappaqua, I'd love to see clear information about, are you planning on lots of extra funding for these kinds of critical services? Is it not done that way? How will you be able to participate in mutual aid agreements with other municipalities if suddenly you have all of these additional people in Chappaqua that you need to care for? So I have those questions. I worry about the infrastructure in all of Newcastle versus focusing more funding on downtown Chappaqua. Emergencies, flooding, power, waste management, all those things relative to this new density. Finally, I would love to say that I'm thrilled that Mr. Gray Williams commented live tonight because I absolutely agree with the town historian that prescribing architecture for the future, since I am a graduate of the Columbia Architecture School, creates a false sense of authenticity for Chappaqua. You are what you are in every single moment. We all are facing the challenges that we face in every single moment, and that becomes our legacy and our history tomorrow. This notion of only 5 categories of architecture is disturbing to me because it's not authentic. It almost becomes the creation of a Disney movie set that you want to
Cynthia,
set.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You've gone over the 3 minutes.
And that is
Wrap
all I
up.
have to say, that I worry about the actual future image. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Cynthia. The next person is Rob F.
Can you hear me?
I can. I didn't want to presume who it was. Hi, Rob.
How are you? Thanks to all of you for your patience tonight and for being on the phone since 6 o'clock this evening. I wanted to really address kind of a more basic and fundamental issue, which is parking, which I'm still trying to get my hands around, but is obviously very important to the viability of the project. And I'm trying to understand how we get a more detailed parking policy that accommodates new vehicles that would accompany the construction of all the new units that are being talked about for downtown. My current understanding is that fees would be paid to a fund for parking construction that doesn't have a lot of detail surrounding that plan and which may not even be executable, given the fact that, you know, I'm not aware of any places to build parking garages or any extra spots downtown other than building, you know, multi-level lots in the town parking lot, which I don't think there's a lot of current appetite for. I guess the other alternative I've seen in the current proposal, which I realize is still under development, talks about people kind of parking a certain amount of distance away from their units, which also seems to be kind of a suboptimal alternative and not very attractive. The idea of parking anywhere from, you know, a quarter to a mile away from your unit, I think is a hard thing to, it's a hard sale. I don't think it's something that really would work for most people, especially anybody who would have either be elderly or might have a young child. I think those are all difficult things to do. So I'm trying to really wrap my hands around this very basic issue, which seems to be kind of a fundamental gatekeeping issue that we need to make work, and how it's going to work. Because if we can't get the parking down, I'm not sure how any of the rest of it works. And that's it. That's what I'm trying to get some understanding around. I realize this isn't a Q&A, but, you know, if there's new detail on that other than what's in the proposal, I'd like to understand it, because right now, to me, it's a real fundamental obstacle in moving forward.
Thanks, Rob. I know it's not a Q&A, and I can't give you the A right now anyway, other than to say that parking is an issue, and that the town board has also identified as something that we want our consultants to provide additional information about. So I would anticipate additional information and analyses to come back to us through our seeker process. So we join you in some of the questions that you have raised.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's a non-answer, but it's true.
It is what it is. You know, something that's very fundamental that we need to address.
Right.
Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, the last comment that we're going to take, the last person with their, oh, I'm sorry, Laurie, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. You know, so Rob was saying, is there any new information that's come to light to address this issue, in this case parking, right? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but until all of the questions and content goes back to the consultant, there really is no new information that we can get. So we're like waiting for the new information, and what gates that process is the end of this process.
Correct. Okay, the last commenter we're going to have this evening is Charles Napoli.
Good evening. I know you can't hear me because you haven't been listening to me for 40 years. However, I do want to say that about Gray Williams. When I first met Gray Williams, I didn't like him, but after tonight, I must say I still don't like him because he made me so jealous. I would wish I could have said what he said about the architectural comments. There's a lot of pages in this form that don't belong there. And I agree with Gray and the last speaker. But while we're talking about architecture, I want to give you some architecture talk about this particular form-based code solution. I like form-based coding. It gets to where we want to go if we know where we're going. But to make some assumptions, and what we did with this form-based code is made some assumptions. So here's the architecture talk. We have a 5-pound bag and 10 pounds of stuff in it. And what's happening is it doesn't fit. We've got a lot of stuff hanging over the bag. The sides are torn. If you envision a shopping bag that breaks in the parking lot, there's stuff all over the floor, which a lot of people are commenting on. The stuff that's not fitting is what we're commenting on. And the critiques have been amazing. I can't believe the quality of the comments, the quality of the concern, the quality of the knowledge that people have been sharing with you about this process. But one thing that I really want to get into is this word inclusionary. And I think what's missing here is the people being included in the process, not about who's coming to town, but the people who are helping create the town. And what would be participatory, inclusionary, and empowering would be to evaluate the people's plan, not your plan, not the developer's plan, but our plan for the hamlet. Now, so you ask why? Well, I wrote a bunch of stuff out here, but over listening to all of the comments, I've written stuff over everything. So I'm going to try to read it the best I can. And if I slow down, it's because I have other writing over the top of it. But it is about we, the people, that must be the contributors of the identifiable characteristics, shapes, forms, and feelings that enhance the complexity and density of our hamlet, our controlled growth sector. That's all code talk via the form-based code. Once adopted, the forms of the form-based code yield a condition and look of our community pattern, a hamlet proudly crafted by us, and happy and very, very happy to have chosen this place and how we want it to be. Once adopted, the forms of the form-based code yield the condition and look of our community pattern. The words of our words of a charrette, a gathering, are the seeds to generate the hamlet's aesthetic neighborhood character. Our words of the charrette, a charrette, are the words that are the map to our future. Our words have not been heard. As of this writing, we have had no say in the hamlet detailed design planning. The blueprint.
Chuck, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we've reached the end of 3 minutes.
No
If you could
kidding.
wrap up, please.
Well, I just think that our money would well be spent on bringing people together and presenting to you for your consideration the people's plan, a detailed design plan of what we want for the form-based code law to be written to. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for those comments. So that concludes the number of people who had their hands raised tonight for the public hearing. I want to take a brief moment and adjourn this public hearing so that the town board can go into executive session. Nick, I have a couple of questions that I want to be able to ask you with regard to the seeker process. Can we please adjourn for, I would guess, probably about 5 minutes total. Is that acceptable?
Yep, and let everyone know
Yes.
we're coming
We just
back.
need a second, a motion and a second.
A motion and a second, and then I think what we need to do is go back into the executive session link that we had. Okay, so we're going to exit this meeting.
Okay.
So just to be clear,
Executive
this
session.
public hearing is is continuing while the board convenes an executive session to ask me some questions.
Yes.
Correct. It's
Right,
just
so
that
Pam,
the
don't
town,
close it out.
right.
No, what I'll do is I'll put up the slide that says you're in executive session
Perfect. Thank you.
and welcome back later.
Okay,
Thanks,
and
Pam.
so, yeah, so everyone who's going to executive session, we're gonna use our link, so we need to leave this meeting, go back.
Lori moved.
Nick, do we need to move to do that?
Yep, Lori moved and Jeremy seconded, and then we just need a vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Okay, bye. Hi, guys.
Hi again.
Welcome back.
Nick, do we have to move to continue the work session?
No, you had adjourned and then you moved out of executive session and now you're still in the public hearing.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I missed what you said. What do I need to ask for procedurally?
No, we've already moved out of executive session, so the town board is convened back into the public hearing. So there's no motions or anything that's need to be made at this time.
Oh, okay. All right. So we're back.
Yes.
Thanks everybody for your patience with us while we had that brief executive session with our council to speak regarding the seeker process. And specifically the town board needed guidance from our council with regard to our next steps on the public hearing and with regard to the recommendations that were made by several of the folks who spoke this evening regarding holding open the public hearing. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Councilwoman Lisa Katz, who is going to, I think, kick off our conversation with what she has said is a recommendation for the board.
Okay, thank you. So we heard the attorney for the Chappaqua Central School District came on earlier and said that the school board will have their final comments to us within the next 30 days. And I know we already invited them to come on February 2nd to meet with us. And that invitation is still open. We welcome them to do that. And certainly we want to meet with them as soon as their comments are finalized. After that, we heard residents tonight. So I am proposing that we have one more public hearing, our 6th and final public hearing that can be used as a response to those final CCSD comments on February 23rd to discuss those school board comments. According to the attorney, that timeline should be perfect. And so that's what I'm proposing. We hold it open for one more meeting, public session, after which, we will close the public hearing. And then let our, which will not close the whole process. It will just let our consultants start analyzing more of the data so we can get back to everyone. That's it.
So I appreciate that suggestion. And I feel like what's really important to note here is that the town board has been desirous of having a collaborative and open relationship with the Board of Education. And in order to do that, we need to be able to communicate with one another directly and in a joint meeting where we all sit down and discuss our thoughts and our comments with one another, not just for the town board to comment, but for the Board of Education to speak with us as well. We need to be able to have that kind of collaboration. We need to be able to have the kind of relationship where we're communicating honestly with one another and not through our attorneys, but where we're really able to put issues out on the table in a joint meeting with one another and not speak through intermediaries. I think it's in the best interests of the community for us to have the kind of relationship where we can talk to one another. And so I know that that is where the town board is at, and that's where our hearts are. And I hope that the school board will join with us in having that kind of collaborative working relationship. We learned this afternoon, we learned that these findings weren't considered final and that additional analyses were going to be required via a community-wide email that went out. I really am desirous of a relationship where we're not hearing about something important like that via community-wide email, but via a phone call, or at the very least via a direct email to the town board. And so, you know, I want to be responsive to the members of the community who are asking us for the opportunity to hear and absorb the final comments from or final analysis and report from the school board's consultants. And I also want to be clear that we're open to doing that, but we also we need to put some parameters around that, because we need to move forward with this process. I'm so desirous of being able to turn all of these comments, and I agree with Chuck, who spoke at the end of the meeting about how impressive the comments have been. We've had 5 public hearings. We've had 3 community engagement sessions. We've had 3 town board work sessions. We've gotten a lot of feedback. And I really want to be able to turn that back to our professional consultants and start to get the results of the additional analyses that are needed. And so, you know, I want to be responsive, and we will be responsive. I support your proposal, Lisa. But at the same time, I want to put some parameters around how we do that.
And Lisa, can you just clarify, after that public hearing, does that mean the comment period is extended a certain amount of time?
Yes, I believe we said 30 days, but I'm not sure if that holds true, but I believe we said 30 days for written comments after the public hearings closed.
Correct.
Right.
Even though I think only 10 is required by law, right? But we said we would hold it open for 30.
Yeah, I support that proposition as well. And I understand a gentleman spoke earlier about the sort of frustration that people seem to have that we were not answering their questions. And a lot of this, I don't use the term, well, I'm going to use the term sort of above our pay grade, meaning our expert consultants have to examine these questions and comments and give us the material so we can share back. But we can't start answering these questions unless our consultants start working. So if they can do this parallel and start doing what they need to do in certain different areas, and we can continue to work with the school, I absolutely support that. But I also second Ivy's desirous, I think that's the term you used, position to work together. So we just ask that we have this information shared directly to us, engage with us, not through council, not through community letters or anything like that.
Okay.
So we just move to adjourn into the public hearing until
February 23rd would
February
like.
23rd.
That would be for, yeah.
So moved.
So second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And that concludes our 5th public hearing.
How many hours is that?
Okay, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. We started at 5:30, guys.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
we
how
actually-
many hours of public hearings?
Oh no, it's been worse.
It's been, yeah.
Like 2 dozen, maybe.
What's next on the agenda, Jill?
Yeah, so we have proposed actions of payment of claims.
Good night, everyone.
Right.
Good night, Sabrina. Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
Sabrina.
So much.
Talk to you at the department head meeting tomorrow.
I've got the resolution. Do you want me to read it, guys?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. I move to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $378,526.85 listed in the summary pre-check writing report and detail voucher detail reports, all dated January 17, 2021. Checks will be issued and mailed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, January 20th, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do we need a resolution for the letter in support, or we'll just write a letter in support that reflects for the priority? We don't normally do a resolution, to just do a letter in support.
So let's just do it.
Okay.
All right, is that it then? Are we done?
Unless you want to stay, I think we're done.
What are all of these other items? They're coming next week?
They're all administrative items. We were just going to put them on like a real like town board meeting that we do where, you know,
I see.
yes.
Okay.
So that'll be our meeting next week. Okay. We have a short meeting. If you, am I correct on this? We've got the Holocaust program.
Correct. Next week at 7:30.
Right. So I was trying to keep the agenda a little bit lighter because we were going to try to take care of this before the meeting. So meet at 5:30, and then we just have a couple of other things on the agenda. We'll have a couple of other work session things, and then just go into a town board meeting and approve these resolutions.
Right.
We'll
And
have to
next
see
week is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And so at 7:30, we'll be joining the members of the Newcastle Holocaust and Human Rights Committee and the Horace Greeley Club Enough. And they have a speaker, a World War II veteran and liberator who's going to be presenting.
So what time is that for next week?
Sorry, 7:30.
That one's 7:30, right? So we will make sure that we are done with our town board meeting well before then, so people can join. Okay.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.